I was standing quietly in the grand lobby of St. Andrew Medical Center when my daughter-in-law laughed loud enough for strangers to hear. "Richard, maybe you should wait in the corner," Olivia said with a smirk. "People here might think you're one of the patients who got lost." My son lowered his eyes and said nothing. Before I could answer, one of the nation's most respected heart surgeons
There were
stopped
complications
in his tracks,
during the procedure.
stared at me with tears filling
I'm
his
afraid he
eyes,
didn't make
and
it.
crossed the room. "Mrs. Richard Caldwell," he said, his voice trembling. "I've been searching for my very first mentor for over 20 years. If this story touches your heart, I'd love for you to stay with me until the end. Please, like this video, subscribe if you enjoy heartfelt family stories, and tell me in the comments where you're watching from and what time it is there right now. Most of all, let me know what would you have done if you were standing in my shoes." Before that night at St. Andrew Medical Center, I had learned how to disappear inside my own family. My name is Richard Caldwell, and yes, I know people always paused when they heard it. My father had wanted a son. When I arrived instead, small and red-faced, on a rainy April morning, he still wrote the name Richard on my birth certificate and said, "She'll grow into it." For 68 years I did. I grew into many things: a teacher, a widow, a mother, a woman who knew how to stretch a dollar until it almost cried, and eventually an old lady sitting quietly at the edge of her son's kitchen table, trying not to take up too much space. I moved in with my son, Ethan, 6 months after I sold my little house in Laurel County, Kentucky. It wasn't because I wanted to. That house had been mine for 39 years. It had blue shutters, a stubborn front step that leaned slightly to the left, and a backyard where Ethan had once chased fireflies with a jelly jar in his hands. I knew every creak in the hallway, every scratch on the pantry door, every place where the afternoon sun landed across the living room floor. My husband Samuel had died in that house. My son had grown up in that house. I had become old in that house. But after my knee surgery, Ethan called me every evening sounding worried. "Mom, you can't keep living alone. I'm managing. You shouldn't have to manage." That sentence touched me. At my age, even a small kindness can sound like a rescue. He came down one Saturday with his wife Olivia and walked through my house like he was inspecting damage after a storm. He checked the bathroom railings, the basement steps, the old furnace. Olivia stood in the doorway of my kitchen, holding her designer purse with both hands, looking around as if the walls might smell old enough to cling to her clothes. "It's charming," she said, which was the kind of word people used when they meant small, outdated, and not worth much. Ethan didn't hear the tone, or maybe he heard it and decided not to. "We have plenty of room in Columbus," he told me. "The guest suite is finished. You'll have your own bathroom, no stairs. You'll be close to doctors." Doctors. That was always the word people used when they wanted to make leaving sound sensible. I looked at my son's face and saw the little boy he used to be, the one who once cried because he thought the moon followed our car home. I saw love in his eyes and worry too. So I sold my house, packed 4 decades into boxes, and moved into Ethan and Olivia's large white home on a quiet street where every lawn looked trimmed by the same careful hand. For the first week, Olivia was polite. Not warm, never warm, but polite. She showed me the guest room and said, "We cleared the bottom drawers for you." 2 drawers. I had come with 12 boxes, 3 suitcases, a cedar chest, and 1 framed photograph of Samuel in his army uniform. Olivia looked at the boxes and smiled with only her mouth. "We're trying to keep the house uncluttered," she said. You understand. I did understand. I understood that my whole life was clutter to her. So I donated more than half my clothes. I gave away my mixing bowls, my quilt rack, my husband's old reading chair, and the green lamp Ethan used to fall asleep beside when he was afraid of thunderstorms. I kept my Bible, Samuel's photograph, a tin recipe box, and a small wooden chest full of letters from students I had taught long ago. That chest was the only thing Olivia never asked about, probably because it looked too plain to be valuable. Every morning, I woke before sunrise. Old habits do not retire just because the body does. I made coffee, wiped the counters, folded towels, watered the plants, and packed Ethan a lunch, even though he told me I didn't have to. "I know, honey," I'd say, "but I like doing it." And I did. Taking care of people had been the shape of my life for so long that I didn't know what else to do with my hands. Olivia worked in public relations for a private development firm. She was beautiful in a polished way, with smooth blonde hair, sharp perfume, and a closet full of clothes that looked like they had never known rain. She liked order status and compliments from strangers. She liked dinner parties where people used words like investment expansion and legacy. She did not like me. At first, her dislike wore gloves. "Richard, maybe don't use that mug when guests come over. It's a little chipped. Richard, the way you say supper is adorable. So country. Richard, you don't have to tell everyone you are a school teacher. People might assume you're looking for attention." I would smile and say nothing. I had spent 34 years teaching teenagers who came to school hungry, angry, grieving, or afraid. I knew when a person was throwing stones just to hear something break. I also knew silence could be a shield, though it was a heavy one to hold. Ethan noticed pieces of it, never the whole thing. If Olivia corrected me at dinner, he would clear his throat and change the subject. If she rolled her eyes when I talked about church or the price of eggs, he would suddenly ask about the weather. If she said, "Your mother doesn't understand how these things work," he would give me a quick, apologetic look, then stare down at his plate. That look hurt more than Olivia's words, because Olivia had not been raised by me. Ethan had. I remembered him at 8 years old, sitting at our kitchen table with math homework spread in front of him, crying because numbers swam on the page. I remembered working with him until midnight, then getting up at 5 to grade papers before school. I remembered sewing patches on his jeans because we could not afford new ones. I remembered sitting in a used car dealership praying the old station wagon would last one more winter. But Ethan remembered success. A nice home, a good job, a wife who knew how to move through important rooms. Somewhere along the way, I had become part of the background of his life, like an old photograph nobody dusted, but nobody threw away either. One evening, about 3 weeks before the hospital gala, Olivia hosted a dinner for 2 couples from her firm. She asked me to help prepare the food, but suggested I eat earlier. "It'll be more of a professional conversation," she said, arranging white roses in a vase. "You'd be bored." I was standing at the sink peeling potatoes. "I don't mind sitting quietly." Her smile tightened. "That's not really the point." I looked down at my hands. They were bent at the knuckles now, the veins raised beneath thin skin. These hands had written recommendation letters, tied children's shoes, held my husband's hand, while cancer took him, and signed the check that sent Ethan to college when I was not sure how I would pay the electric bill. But to Olivia, they were only old hands useful when there were dishes to wash. So I ate soup alone in my room while laughter rose through the floorboards. Later that night, I came downstairs for water and heard my name. Olivia was in the kitchen with one of the women, their voices softened by wine. "I don't know how you do it," the woman said. "Living with your mother-in-law?" Olivia laughed. "Honestly, I deserve an award. Ethan feels guilty, so here we are. She's harmless, but she's very simple." Simple. I stood in the dark hallway holding my empty glass, feeling that word settle over me like dust. The woman said something I couldn't hear. Olivia replied. She was some little school teacher in Kentucky. Sweet, I guess, but she has no idea how the real world works. Sometimes I feel like I adopted a grandmother from a museum. They both laughed. I went back upstairs without water. That night, I opened the wooden chest at the foot of my bed. Inside were old envelopes tied with faded ribbon. Some had childish handwriting. Some came from universities, hospitals, military bases, law offices, and small towns I had never visited. I picked up one letter and ran my thumb over the return address. Benjamin Hayes. The paper was yellowed now, but I still remembered the boy. Thin shoulders, serious eyes, shoes too small. A grief so large it seemed to swallow his voice. I did not open the letter. I simply held it for a while. There are some parts of your life you stop talking about because nobody asks. And after enough years, silence begins to look like modesty, when really, it is just loneliness wearing a clean dress. The next morning, Ethan found me making pancakes. "You okay, Mom?" I looked at him. My son had Samuel's eyes, gentle but tired. For a moment, I wanted to tell him everything. I wanted to tell him that I was not simple, that I had once stood between children and despair, that I had given away more than I kept, that I had mattered before I became someone's burden. Instead, I smiled. "I'm fine, honey." He kissed my cheek and grabbed his coffee. Olivia walked in behind him, already dressed for work, tapping on her phone. "Richard, please don't use butter on the cast iron pan. I just had the kitchen deep cleaned." I turned off the stove. "Yes, Olivia." Ethan hesitated, then said, "Liv, Mom's just making breakfast." Olivia looked up. "And I'm just asking her to respect my home. My home. Not our home. Not your home. My home." Ethan said nothing after that. That was how the days passed. Small cuts, quiet rooms, words that sounded polite until they reached the heart. I learned where to stand, when to speak, how to laugh softly at jokes that made me smaller. I learned that being tolerated can sometimes hurt worse than being hated, because hatred at least admits you exist. But no one in that house knew the whole story of Richard Caldwell. Not Olivia, not even Ethan. They knew the old woman who folded laundry, misplaced her glasses, and wore cardigans from a department store that no longer existed. They did not know the teacher who had once stayed after school until the janitor locked the doors. They did not know the woman who paid exam fees out of her grocery money. They did not know how many children had sat across from me and heard, sometimes, for the first time in their lives, "You are not finished yet." And they certainly did not know that one of those children had grown up to become a man whose name appeared on hospital banners, medical journals, and television interviews. I had never told them because I believed good deeds should not be performed for applause. But I was beginning to learn something painful. When you hide your light for too long, some people mistake you for darkness. The invitation arrived on a Tuesday afternoon, thick and cream-colored, with Olivia's name printed in gold across the front. I found it sitting on the kitchen island beside a vase of white tulips and a stack of magazines Olivia kept arranged by color, not by reading. The envelope looked too expensive to touch with wet hands, so I dried mine on a dish towel before picking it up. St. Andrew Medical Center, Annual Charity Gala. The name stopped me, not because I had ever attended one of their fancy events. I had not. I had spent most of my life in school gyms, cafeteria fundraisers, parent-teacher nights, and folding chairs that squeaked every time someone shifted their weight. I knew the smell of chalk dust, cafeteria coffee floor wax, and rain-soaked backpacks. I did not belong to a world of gold lettering and hospital galas. Still, the name St. Andrew pulled something old from the back of my mind. A boy's face. A letter written in blue ink. A dream too large for a child who owned only 2 shirts. I was still holding the invitation when Olivia walked in. She stopped so sharply her heels clicked against the floor. "Richard," she said, her voice light but tight. "That's for me." "Oh." I set it down carefully. I wasn't opening it. I just saw the hospital name. Her eyes flicked over my face as if she were checking whether I understood what kind of event it was. "It's a very important gala," she said. Major donors, physicians, board members, community leaders. My firm helped sponsor one of the fundraising tables, so Ethan and I are expected to attend. That sounds wonderful, I said. She studied me for a moment. It's not really the kind of thing you'd enjoy. I smiled because I had learned that smiling made people less uncomfortable when they were trying to exclude you. I imagine not. Ethan came home early that evening, carrying takeout and a tired expression. Olivia waited until dinner to bring up the gala, which told me she had already rehearsed the conversation in her mind. We need to go Saturday, she said, placing her fork down. Black tie optional, but everyone will dress formally. Ethan nodded. Sounds fine. And your mother will need dinner here before we leave. I looked at my plate. Ethan looked up. Mom can come with us. Olivia laughed once, as if he had said something sweet and foolish. To the St. Andrew Gala. Why not? Because it isn't a church potluck, Ethan. The words landed softly, but I felt them. Church potluck. As if that were the highest room a woman like me could understand. Ethan's jaw tightened. She's my mother. Olivia's smile thinned. I'm aware. There was a silence, then the kind that spreads across a table like spilled water. I could feel Ethan wanting to defend me and wanting peace at the same time. He had always hated conflict. Even as a boy, if two classmates argued, he would stare at the floor until it ended. I used to think gentleness was his strength. Now I wondered if silence had grown around it like ivy choking the life out of it. It's all right, I said. I don't need to go. Ethan turned to me. Mom? No, really. I'm sure I'd be out of place. Olivia picked up her glass. That's not what I meant, but of course it was. Ethan pushed his chair back. I want her there. We can get another ticket. Olivia stared at him. There was a sharpness in her eyes I had seen before, usually, when something threatened the image she worked so hard to polish. After a moment, she breathed out through her nose and said, Fine, if you insist. Ethan relaxed slightly. Then Olivia looked at me. But Richard, if you come, you'll have to let me help you choose something appropriate. It's a formal medical charity event. People notice things. At my age, people notice only what they want to use against you. The next day, Olivia entered my room without knocking while I was folding laundry. She carried 3 garment bags over one arm and had her phone tucked between her shoulder and ear. No, I'm telling you, the Caldwell table needs to be close enough for visibility but not right in front, she said into the phone. Yes, near the donor wall. Perfect. I stood there holding a folded nightgown. She ended the call and looked around my room. Her gaze landed on Samuel's photograph, then on the wooden chest, then on the cardigan hanging from the closet door. Let's see what you have. I opened the closet. There was not much inside. A navy dress I wore to funerals, a pale green one I had worn to church on Easter, a dark gray skirt, a few blouses, sensible shoes, clothes bought to last, not impress. Olivia moved each hanger with 2 fingers. No, definitely no. She paused at the navy dress. Maybe if we cover it. It's comfortable, I said. That isn't the goal. I looked at her. What is the goal? She gave me a little laugh. To look presentable. Not beautiful, not dignified, not like a woman who deserved to enter the room. Just presentable enough not to embarrass her. She pulled out the navy dress and held it against me. It's dated, but it'll have to do. I have a shawl somewhere. And please wear your hair pinned back neatly. My hair is always neat. I mean, more polished. I nodded. She opened one of the garment bags and removed a silver gown that shimmered under the bedroom light. For herself, of course. The fabric looked like water. She held it up in front of the mirror and smiled at her reflection. Events like this matter, she said. You have to understand, Ethan and I are building relationships. People at St. Andrew know people with influence. Board members, donors, developers. One wrong impression can follow you. I wanted to ask whether I was the wrong impression. Instead, I folded the nightgown again, though it was already folded. "What does the gala raise money for?" I asked. Olivia blinked as if the question surprised her. "Some hospital program. Scholarships, community care, medical outreach. Something like that." Something like that. I felt the name St. Andrew stir inside me again. Medical outreach. Scholarships. Years ago, I had written a recommendation letter addressed to a scholarship committee connected to St. Andrew Medical Foundation. I remembered staying after school to type it on an old computer that froze every 20 minutes. I remembered describing a boy named Benjamin Hayes as a student of uncommon discipline, compassion, and moral courage. I remembered enclosing copies of his test scores, then quietly placing a money order in the envelope because the application fee would have kept him from applying. That was more than 20 years ago. Surely it could not be the same St. Andrew. Surely the world was not that small. Saturday came with gray skies and a soft, steady rain. The kind of rain that made old joints ache and memories louder. I spent most of the afternoon in my room getting ready. I put on the navy dress. Olivia's shawl smelled faintly of perfume and dry cleaning. I pinned my silver hair back with pearl clips I had worn at Ethan's wedding. For a moment, I stood in front of the mirror and barely recognized myself. Not because I looked glamorous. I did not. I looked like what I was, a tired older woman in a borrowed shawl and an old dress trying to appear grateful for being included. I opened the wooden chest before leaving. I did not know why. Maybe the hospital name had unsettled me. Maybe something in my spirit needed reminding. Inside the chest, the letters rested in their old bundles. I touched the one from Benjamin Hayes, but did not remove it. "You made me believe my life could be bigger than my circumstances." That line came back to me without opening the paper. I closed the chest quickly when I heard Olivia calling. "Richard, we need to leave." Downstairs, Ethan stood in a black suit adjusting his cuffs. His face softened when he saw me. "You look nice, Mom." It was a simple sentence, but my heart reached for it. "Thank you, honey." Olivia came down behind him in her silver gown, shining like a blade under the chandelier. She stopped on the last step and looked me over. "The dress is fine," she said. "Just remember, this is not a family reunion. These are important people. Let Ethan and me handle the conversations." Ethan frowned. "Liv." "What am helping?" She turned to me again. "And please don't mention old teaching stories unless someone asks. People at these events don't need long personal histories." I felt my fingers curl around my small black purse. I understand, but something inside me did not understand anymore. For months, I had bent myself smaller to fit inside Olivia's comfort. I had swallowed words. I had accepted corrections. I had let her treat my life as if it were a faded photograph tucked in a drawer. But standing there, in that borrowed shawl, hearing her warn me not to speak of the very work that had given my life meaning, I felt a quiet ache turn into something steadier. Not anger. Not yet. Memory. The kind that reminds you who you were before people started telling you who you had become. In the car, Olivia sat in the front passenger seat, checking her lipstick in the visor mirror. Ethan drove. I sat in the back watching the rain slide down the window in crooked lines. Olivia went over the evening like a commander before battle. "We'll arrive at 6:30. Ethan, you should speak with Mark Delaney from the board. He knows the zoning people. I need to find Linda Brooks and thank her for the table placement. Richard, there will be a seating chart, so don't wander." I wasn't planning to wander. I just mean, hospitals can be confusing. I looked out at the wet streets. Hospitals had never confused me. I had sat in too many waiting rooms, held too many hands, prayed too many frightened prayers beneath fluorescent lights. But I knew what Olivia meant. She meant I might get lost among important people. Ethan glanced at me in the rearview mirror. "You okay back there?" "Yes," I said. He looked as if he wanted to say more, but Olivia touched his arm. "Turn right here." St. Andrew Medical Center rose ahead of us, all glass and light, against the rainy evening. The gala entrance had a red carpet under a white canopy. Valets opened car doors. Women lifted their gowns above puddles. Men in dark suits laughed beneath umbrellas. Cameras flashed near a banner that read, "Honoring Excellence Healing Communities." My chest tightened. Healing communities. I had written those words once in lesson plans, grant proposals, letters for children who needed someone official to believe in them. Ethan helped me from the car. His hand was warm around my elbow. "You sure you're all right?" Before I could answer, Olivia stepped close and whispered, "Smile. Richard. And please stay near us until we get inside." I smiled, but as I looked at the glowing hospital doors, at the people moving through them with practiced confidence, I felt a strange pull deep in my heart, as if the past had been waiting behind those doors longer than any of us knew. And as we stepped into the bright lobby of St. Andrew Medical Center, I had no idea that before the night ended, the woman Olivia wanted hidden in the corner would become the one person everyone turned to see. The lobby of St. Andrew Medical Center looked less like a hospital that night and more like a palace built from glass marble and money. Golden lights hung from the ceiling in long, glowing circles. A string quartet played near a fountain where floating candles drifted across the water. Men in tuxedos and women in gowns moved through the room with glasses of champagne in their hands, speaking in soft voices that somehow still carried confidence. Everywhere I looked, there were flower arrangements taller than children-polished signs with sponsor names and smiling volunteers guiding guests toward the ballroom. I had been inside hospitals many times in my life, but never one like that. The hospitals I knew smelled like antiseptic coffee from vending machines and fear. They had plastic chairs, crying families, nurses with tired feet, and televisions playing too loudly in waiting rooms. St. Andrew smelled like lilies, expensive perfume, and fresh rain carried in on wool coats. Olivia straightened her shoulders the moment we entered. It was as if she had stepped onto a stage. She slipped her arm through Ethan's and gave him the kind of smile she used when people were watching. Her silver gown caught the light with every movement. I walked a step behind them, careful not to let my purse swing into anyone, careful not to step on the edge of Olivia's dress, careful not to look as out of place as I felt. A young volunteer handed us programs. "Welcome to the St. Andrew Medical Center Annual Charity Gala," she said brightly. "Thank you," Olivia replied in a voice warmer than any she had used with me that week. The volunteer looked at me and smiled. "You look lovely tonight, ma'am." Before I could answer, Olivia gave a quick laugh. "She's very excited." "Thank you," Olivia replied in a voice warmer than any she had used with me that week. The volunteer looked at me and smiled. "You look lovely tonight, ma'am." Before I could answer, Olivia gave a quick laugh. "She's very excited," Olivia said, placing a hand lightly on my back but steering me forward at the same time. "First time at something like this?" The volunteer's smile became polite. I lowered my eyes. It was such a small thing. Not cruel enough for anyone else to notice. Not loud enough to call an insult. But it placed me exactly where Olivia wanted me, beneath her, behind her, an old woman being kindly managed. Inside the reception area, Ethan spotted a man he seemed to recognize. "Mark Delaney." Olivia whispered quickly. "Board member? Real estate connections? Be normal." Ethan gave her a look. "Olivia, be confident." They moved toward a tall man with silver hair and a red pocket square. Olivia turned back just enough to say, "Richard, why don't you stand near that column for a moment? We'll come get you." The column was beside a table stacked with donation brochures. I nodded and went where I was placed. For several minutes, I stood there holding the program in both hands. People passed me without seeing me. A waiter offered me a sparkling drink, and I took it, though I did not want it. The bubbles stung my tongue. Across the room, Olivia laughed at something Mark Delaney said, tilting her head just right. Ethan stood beside her, smiling, but slightly stiff. I watched my son in his dark suit. He looked successful, handsome, respected. I wondered if anyone in that room would believe he once slept under a quilt I had sewn from old shirts because we could not afford a new comforter. I wondered if they would believe I had worked summer school for 3 straight years to help pay for his engineering program. I wondered if Ethan remembered any of that when he stood beside Olivia in bright rooms like this. Then I felt foolish for thinking that way. A mother's sacrifice is not a debt. You do not hand your child a bill for love. Still, there is a special kind of ache when the child you carried through storms lets someone else treat you like rainwater on the floor. After a while, Ethan returned. "Mom, come meet Mark." Olivia's smile tightened at once, but she did not stop him. Mark Delaney shook my hand. "Mrs. Caldwell, pleasure. Please call me Richard." His eyebrows lifted for half a second. People always reacted to my name, though most were too polite to ask. Olivia stepped in quickly. "Richard was a school teacher years ago. Very small town. She's living with us now." There it was again. Years ago. Small town. Living with us. 3 neat labels, each one making me smaller. Mark smiled politely. "Teaching is honorable work." "It certainly kept her busy," Olivia said with a light laugh. "Though she'll tell you all about it if you let her." My cheeks warmed. Ethan shifted beside me. "Live." What she said softly. "I'm only joking." Mark looked uncomfortable. "What did you teach Mrs. Caldwell English?" I said. "Mostly high school. Sometimes remedial reading. Sometimes whatever the school needed and couldn't afford to hire for." "That sounds demanding." "It was," I said, "but it was meaningful." Olivia glanced at someone across the room and touched Ethan's sleeve. "We should circulate that word again. Circulate. As if the evening were not about people at all, but about moving through them correctly." Before Ethan could respond, Olivia leaned close to me. "There are chairs near the wall," she murmured. "You might be more comfortable there." I looked at her. "I am comfortable standing." Her smile did not reach her eyes. "I'm trying to help." "No," I said gently. "You're trying to hide me." The words surprised us both. Ethan turned toward me fully. Olivia froze, her lips parting just slightly. For one brief second, I saw what she looked like when she was not prepared. Then her expression hardened into something smooth. "Richard," she said in a low voice, "this is not the place." I almost laughed, not because it was funny, but because women like me had heard that sentence our whole lives. Not the place, not the time, not in front of people, not when it matters. Swallow it now. Bleed later. "I won't embarrass you," I said. She looked at me as if I already had. The first truly public humiliation came 20 minutes later. Olivia had gathered with 3 women near the donor wall, all of them dressed as if they had stepped out of the same expensive catalog. Ethan had been pulled into a conversation with Mark and another man from the hospital board. I was standing nearby, not speaking, simply listening, when one of the women smiled at me. "And you are—" Before I could answer, Olivia slid in. "This is Ethan's mother, Richard Caldwell." "Richard," one woman repeated. I nodded. My father had a sense of certainty before I was born. The women laughed lightly, but not cruelly. For a moment, I felt the old rhythm of conversation return to me. Then Olivia said, "She has the funniest stories, very old-fashioned. We keep telling her she could write a book called Life Before Email." The laughter changed. a little sharper, a little easier. Another woman said, "Oh, how sweet." Sweet. I knew that tone. It was the tone people used for babies' pets and old ladies they did not intend to take seriously. Olivia continued. She still says supper and pocketbook, and she thinks handwritten thank you notes can fix everything. I looked down at my small black purse. Handwritten thank you notes have done more good in this world than some press releases, I said quietly. One of the women smiled, but Olivia's face flushed. "I'm sorry," she said to them, laughing too loudly. "She doesn't always understand when we're teasing." That was when I saw Linda Brooks for the first time. She stood near the registration table, a woman in her 50s with dark auburn hair, a black gown, and a headset clipped discreetly near her ear. She held a clipboard and moved with the controlled urgency of someone responsible for everything. Her eyes were scanning the room, checking flower staff donors' timing. Then her gaze landed on my name tag. Richard Caldwell. Her expression changed. Not dramatically, not enough for most people to notice, but I had spent 34 years reading faces from the front of classrooms. I knew the moment recognition touched someone. She looked from my name tag to my face, then back to the name tag. I gave her a small, polite smile, thinking perhaps she was confused by my name like everyone else. But Linda Brooks did not smile back. She stepped closer. "Excuse me," she said. "Mrs. Caldwell?" Olivia turned first quick and alert. "Yes." Linda's eyes stayed on me. "Are you Richard Caldwell from Kentucky?" The room seemed to narrow. I felt Ethan looking over from where he stood. Olivia's hand tightened around her champagne glass. "I am," I said. Linda's face went pale with surprise. "Did you teach at Mill Creek High School?" For a heartbeat, I could not speak. Mill Creek. No one in Columbus knew that name. No one at Olivia's dinner parties. No one in Ethan's neighborhood. That school belonged to another lifetime. Cracked sidewalks, metal lockers, a football field that flooded every spring, children carrying burdens too heavy for their backpacks. "Yes," I said slowly. "I did." Linda pressed one hand lightly against her chest. "Oh my goodness." Olivia laughed, but it sounded forced. "Small world, I guess." Linda barely glanced at her. "Mrs. Caldwell, would you wait right here for just a moment?" "Is something wrong?" Ethan asked, stepping closer. "No," Linda said quickly. "No, not wrong at all." She looked at me again, and now there was something like excitement beneath her professionalism. "Please don't leave," she said. Then she turned and walked away fast. Not toward the registration table, not toward the ballroom, toward a guarded hallway near the elevators. Olivia stared after her. "What was that about?" "I don't know," I said, but I was not telling the whole truth. Because in that moment, the name Mill Creek had opened a door inside me. Behind it, I could see a classroom after sunset. A teenage boy sitting with his elbows on a desk, his eyes red from crying, but his jaw set with determination. I could see myself placing a scholarship form in front of him. I could hear my own younger voice saying, "Benjamin, listen to me. Your life is not over just because it started hard." My fingers trembled around my purse. Olivia noticed. "Richard," she whispered sharply, "whatever this is, please don't make it strange." I looked at her then, really looked at her, at the nervousness hiding under her polished makeup, at the fear that something might happen beyond her control, at the way she had spent the whole evening trying to decide where I belonged, only to watch a woman with a clipboard recognize my name and hurry away, as if it mattered. For the first time that night, Olivia was uncertain, and for the first time in a long while, I did not rush to make someone else comfortable. A few guests nearby had begun watching us. Ethan stood beside me now, confused and worried. Olivia lifted her chin, trying to recover her authority. "It's probably a misunderstanding," she said. Maybe it was. Maybe Linda Brooks had confused me with someone else. Maybe there were other women named Richard Caldwell who had taught at Mill Creek High. Maybe the past was not about to step into that shining lobby and speak my name aloud. But deep in my heart, beneath the hurt and humiliation, something had begun to rise. Not pride, not revenge, recognition. A quiet knowing that the life Olivia had mocked was not empty. It had roots, it had witnesses. It had reached places even I had never seen. And as Linda disappeared through the hallway doors, I felt the whole evening shift. Olivia still saw an old woman in a borrowed shawl. But someone in that hospital had seen my name and gone running. For several minutes after Linda Brooks disappeared through those hallway doors, nothing happened. That was almost worse. Olivia stood beside me with her shoulders pulled back and her smile frozen in place, as if she were posing for a photograph nobody was taking. Ethan kept glancing from me to the hallway, then back again, searching my face for an explanation I did not know how to give. "Mom," he said quietly. "Do you know her?" "I don't think so." "But she knew you. She knew the school." Olivia gave a soft laugh, sharp around the edges. "A lot of people know schools. Maybe she's from Kentucky, too." The women near the donor wall had stopped pretending not to listen. One of them lifted her champagne glass, but forgot to drink. Mark Delaney had turned slightly in our direction. Even the waiter who had passed us twice slowed down. Olivia noticed all of it. Her hand closed around Ethan's arm. "We should go into the ballroom. The program is going to start soon." "She asked Mom to wait," Ethan said. Olivia's eyes flashed. "And we have a table. It's a charity gala, not a military drill." That was the first time all evening Ethan's voice carried an edge. Olivia looked stunned, then embarrassed. She leaned closer to him and whispered, though not quietly enough, "Do not make this awkward." I wanted to tell them both to stop. I wanted to shrink back into the column, return to being harmless, let the evening move around me. Old habits rose up inside me like practiced prayers. Keep peace. Smooth it over. Make yourself easy to love. But before I could speak, the hallway doors opened again. Linda Brooks stepped out first, walking quickly. Behind her came a man in a black tuxedo. He was tall, broad-shouldered, with deep brown skin, close-cropped hair, and the calm, focused expression of someone used to walking into emergencies. Even from across the lobby, people recognized him. Conversations thinned. Heads turned. A few guests straightened their posture as he passed. I had seen his face earlier that evening without knowing why it seemed familiar. It had been printed on one of the banners near the entrance. Dr. Benjamin Hayes, Chief of Cardiothoracic Surgery, Keynote Honoree. The glass in my hand suddenly felt too slippery. Benjamin Hayes. The name moved through me like a bell struck underwater. I saw the boy before I saw the man, 14 years old, too thin, sitting alone in the back row of my English class with his coat zipped to his chin because the heat in the old building barely worked. A child who never caused trouble, never raised his hand, never wasted a word. The kind of student other teachers called quiet, when really he was carrying grief so carefully that any sound might spill it. The man walking toward me had his face. Older, stronger, polished by success and years, but it was there. His eyes found mine. He stopped. Everything around me seemed to hold its breath. Linda spoke softly beside him, but he did not answer her. He took one step, then another. His expression changed so completely that the confident surgeon vanished, and for a moment I was looking at a boy on the edge of tears. "Mrs. Caldwell," he said. My throat tightened. "Benjamin." His hand rose to his mouth. Then he crossed the rest of the distance and took both my hands in his. Not like a doctor, greeting a stranger, like a lost son finding his way home. "Oh my God," he whispered. "It is you." I could not move. I could only look at him, at the lines near his eyes, at the silver beginning at his temples, at the expensive tuxedo and the hospital badge clipped discreetly near his jacket. The boy, I remembered, had owned one pair of shoes with soles nearly worn through. This man had an entire lobby leaning toward him. "I didn't know," I said. "I had no idea you were here." He laughed once, but it broke into something close to a sob. "I've looked for you for years." The words entered the room like light. Olivia's face drained of color. Ethan stared at Benjamin, then at me. "You two know each other?" Benjamin did not release my hands. "Know her," he said, turning to Ethan with disbelief, softening into reverence. "Your mother is the reason I became a doctor." The silence that followed was unlike any silence I had ever heard. It was not empty. It was full of surprise, questions, shame, curiosity, and the sudden collapse of every small thing Olivia had said about me that evening. Someone nearby whispered, "That's Dr. Hayes." Another voice murmured, "He knows her." Olivia tried to recover. "Oh, how wonderful," she said too brightly. "Richard never mentioned." Benjamin turned toward her. His politeness remained, but his eyes were sharp now. Mrs. Caldwell never liked to mention the things she did for people. That was part of her greatness. Greatness. No one in my family had used that word near my name in years. I felt my knees weaken. Benjamin noticed immediately. "Please sit down." "I'm all right." "No," he said, gentle but firm. "You spent enough years standing for everyone else." He guided me toward a velvet chair near the donor wall, as if I were someone precious. Ethan moved quickly to my other side, suddenly attentive, suddenly afraid he had missed something important for too long. Olivia remained where she was. For the first time all evening, no one seemed concerned about whether she felt comfortable. Linda Brooks stood nearby with tears in her eyes. "Dr. Hayes?" she said softly. "The program begins in 15 minutes. Benjamin nodded, but he did not look away from me. "Then they can wait 15 minutes. A ripple passed through the small group around us. Doctors, donors, board members, guests, people. Olivia had worked so hard to impress began drawing closer. Not crowding exactly, but gathering with the instinct people have when something real breaks through a room full of performance. Benjamin knelt slightly in front of my chair. That embarrassed me more than the insults had. "Please don't do that," I whispered. "You're an important man." His eyes filled again. "No, Mrs. Caldwell. I am a man because you are important first." My breath caught. Ethan looked down as if the marble floor had become unbearable. Benjamin turned toward him. "I don't know what your mother has told you." "Not much," Ethan said, his voice hoarse. "That sounds like her." Benjamin smiled through emotion. "She never told anyone what she gave. She just gave it." Olivia stepped forward, then forced smile returning in pieces. "Well, Richard has always been very private," she said. "We're all just so surprised. I mean, she was a teacher, of course." But Olivia stepped forward, then forced smile returning in pieces. "Well, Richard has always been very private," she said. "We're all just so surprised. I mean, she was a teacher, of course, but Benjamin asked. One word. Quiet. Deadly. Olivia's mouth opened and closed. "But we didn't know the connection." Ethan finished quickly, though his face showed he knew that was not what she meant. Benjamin looked back at me. "May I tell them?" My first instinct was to say no, not because I was ashamed, Because I had spent a lifetime believing that kindness should remain between the giver, the receiver, and God. Because I did not want my memories turned into a spectacle. Because part of me still wanted to protect Olivia from the humiliation she had so carelessly handed to me. But then I saw Ethan. My son stood there with confusion and guilt already beginning to crack open his face. He did not know me. Not fully. Maybe he never had. Maybe I had mistaken silence for humility, when in truth, it had left my own child ignorant of the life that shaped his. So I nodded. If you feel it would help. Benjamin let out a slow breath. Then he stood, facing the growing circle of people. I was 15 when I met Mrs. Richard Caldwell, he began. I was a sophomore at Mill Creek High School in Kentucky. My mother had died the year before. My father was gone long before that. I was living with an aunt who had 6 children of her own and no money to spare. I came to school hungry most mornings and angry every afternoon. The lobby had gone almost completely still. Even the string quartet seemed quieter. I had already decided I was going to quit. Benjamin continued. Not officially. I was just going to stop trying, stop turning in work, stop believing anything better was possible. That's easier than hoping when hope keeps embarrassing you. His voice trembled. I remembered finding his essay blank except for one sentence. Some people are born already behind. I had written beneath it, then we teach them how to run. Benjamin looked at me. She saw me. Not the angry boy, not the poor boy, not the problem. She saw me. I pressed my handkerchief to my mouth. She kept me after class every day for 3 months. She brought sandwiches and pretended she had packed too much lunch. She found old biology textbooks because I told her once, just once, that I liked learning how the heart worked. She made me read aloud until I stopped stumbling over words I was too proud to admit I didn't know. A murmur moved through the crowd. Linda covered her mouth. Olivia stared at me as if I had turned into someone she could no longer explain. Benjamin smiled faintly. And when I told her medical school was for rich kids and television characters, she looked me dead in the eyes and said, Benjamin Hayes, don't you dare confuse the door being heavy with the door being locked. A soft laugh broke through the crowd, followed by a few quiet sniffles. I remembered saying that too. I had been younger then, stronger. Certain in the way teachers must be certain when children borrow our belief because they have none of their own. Benjamin turned toward Ethan. Your mother paid my SAT fee. She wrote my scholarship essays with me line by line. She drove me 2 counties over to take an entrance exam when my aunt's car broke down. She bought me my first dress shirt for an interview and told me I owed her nothing except to become someone who reached back. Ethan's eyes shone. Mom, he whispered. I could not answer him. Benjamin faced the circle again. When I was accepted into college, I received a letter from the scholarship committee saying an anonymous local educator had added a personal contribution to cover my housing deposit. I didn't know for years it was her. She never told me. She just hugged me at graduation and said, Go heal somebody one day. His voice broke on the last sentence. Then he turned to me, no longer speaking to the crowd. I did, Mrs. Caldwell. I tried. The tears I had held back all evening finally spilled over. You did more than try, Benjamin. He bowed his head. Around us, people began clapping. Not loudly at first. Just a few hands, uncertain, respectful. Then more joined. The sound rose through the marble lobby, warm and human, until it filled the space Olivia had tried to make me disappear inside. I looked at my son. Ethan was crying openly now. Olivia stood beside him with her champagne untouched. Her face pale, her pride stripped bare in front of the very people she had hoped would admire her. But Benjamin was not finished. He turned to Linda. Change the program. Linda blinked. Dr. Hayes, I'm not giving the keynote as planned. Benjamin, I said quickly. No. He looked at me with the same stubborn determination he had carried at 15. Yes, ma'am. Then he faced the room. Tonight, if St. Andrew wants to honor healing, then we begin by honoring the woman who taught me what healing meant before I ever held a scalpel. The applause rose again, and in that shining hospital lobby with my old navy dress borrowed shawl in trembling hands, I realized something that nearly brought me to my knees. Olivia had brought me there hoping I would remain invisible. But the past had walked through those doors wearing a tuxedo. And it had called me mentor. For a long moment, I could not tell whether the applause was real or only something my heart had imagined to protect itself. I sat in that velvet chair with Benjamin Hayes standing beside me, and the entire lobby of St. Andrew Medical Center seemed to tilt around us. A few minutes earlier, I had been the old woman Olivia wanted tucked near a column. Now people were looking at me as if I had stepped out of history carrying proof that quiet lives could still shake marble floors. Benjamin kept one hand gently on my shoulder. It was not a possessive touch. It was protective. That alone nearly broke me. I had spent so much of the last year being handled like an inconvenience, guided away, corrected, managed, moved aside, that I had forgotten what it felt like for someone to stand near me with honor. Linda Brooks wiped her eyes, then straightened, as if remembering she still had an event to run. Dr. Hayes, she said carefully, if we change the program, I'll need to alert the board chair and adjust the introduction. Benjamin nodded. Do it. Benjamin, I whispered, please, you don't owe me this. He turned toward me, and for a second, I saw that boy again, the one who used to sit in my classroom after the final bell pretending he had questions about homework, when really, he just needed somewhere warm to be. I don't owe you, he said softly. I honor you. Those words entered a place in me I had kept locked for years. Ethan was standing close now, his eyes red, his hands restless at his sides. Mom, he said, why didn't you tell me any of this? I looked at my son, and all the noise in the room faded. Because how could I explain it simply? How could I tell him that when you spend your life giving, you do not always keep records of what left your hands? How could I tell him that mothers often bury their own stories beneath their children's achievements, then act surprised when no one remembers where those achievements began? I suppose, I said slowly, I didn't think it was something to announce. But he said you paid for things, school fees, books, a housing deposit. I folded my hands in my lap. Your father and I did what we could. Benjamin shook his head gently. No, Mrs. Caldwell. You did what most people wouldn't. The small group around us had grown. Some people stood openly now, no longer pretending they were not listening. A woman in a sapphire gown held a tissue beneath her eye. Mark Delaney stood with his champagne glass lowered, his expression serious. The women who had laughed at Olivia's jokes looked down at the floor. Olivia remained near Ethan's shoulder, silent. That silence was unfamiliar on her. Benjamin looked toward the guests and spoke again, his voice lower now, more personal. You all know me as a surgeon, he said. Some of you know the titles. Chief of Cardiothoracic Surgery, Department Chair, Foundation Board Member. You know the polished version of the story. He gave a sad smile. But the polished version leaves out the dirt, and most lives that are saved start in the dirt. No one moved. I came from a town where children learned early not to ask for things. We knew which bills were overdue by the way adults closed envelopes. We knew when there wasn't enough food by how our mothers said they weren't hungry. After my mother died, I stopped believing anyone would notice whether I became something or disappeared. His voice grew rough. Mrs. Caldwell noticed. I closed my eyes. The memory returned whole. Benjamin at 15, standing outside my classroom door in November, holding a crumpled disciplinary slip. He had shoved another boy in the hallway. The principal wanted him suspended. I asked him why. He refused to answer until the room emptied. Then he said, "He called my mama trash." I remembered taking the slip from his hand, sitting beside him instead of behind my desk, and saying, "Grief can explain anger, Benjamin. It cannot drive the car." He had stared at me then as if no adult had ever separated his pain from his future. Benjamin continued, "She didn't excuse me. Let me be clear about that. Mrs. Caldwell was kind, but she was not soft. If I came in late, she made me explain why. If I turned in poor work, she made me do it again. If I said I couldn't, she said, 'That is not a complete sentence in my classroom.'" A few people laughed quietly. Even I smiled through tears. She had a way of making you feel ashamed of giving up, not because she judged you, but because she believed in you so fiercely that quitting felt like betraying someone who had already seen your best self. I looked down at my hands. They were trembling again. Olivia had mocked these hands. She had seen age in them, uselessness, dependency. But Benjamin had seen them too. He remembered the sandwiches they packed, the forms they filled out, the coat they buttoned around him one winter morning when he tried to pretend he was not cold. "I didn't have a winter coat my sophomore year," Benjamin said, as if hearing my thoughts. "One morning, it was 20 degrees, and I came to school in a thin hoodie. By lunch, Mrs. Caldwell called me to her room. There was a brown coat hanging over a chair. He glanced at me. She told me her nephew had outgrown it. I covered my face with my hand. I did have a nephew, I murmured. Benjamin smiled. You did not have a nephew that size. A soft ripple of laughter moved through the crowd. I knew she had bought it, he said. I knew because the tag was still in the pocket. But she gave me dignity with the coat. That mattered more than warmth. Linda's eyes filled again. Ethan whispered, Mom. I could hear the little boy in his voice now. The boy who used to crawl into my bed during thunderstorms. The boy who once believed I knew how to fix everything. Benjamin turned toward him with compassion. Your mother understood something most people never learn. Help without dignity can still feel like harm. She never made us feel poor even when we were. She made us feel expected. Expected. That word made my chest ache. I had expected so much from my students because the world expected so little. I had written college applications beside children whose parents had never seen a campus. I had taught grammar with outdated textbooks, used my own money for classroom supplies, and kept crackers in my desk drawer because hunger made learning a cruel joke. And I had loved it. God help me, I had loved it. Not because it was easy. It was not. There were days I cried in my car before driving home. Days I wondered if I had given enough. Days I watched bright children vanish into family emergencies, addiction, poverty, early parenthood, and jobs that needed them more urgently than school did. But there were also days like this one. Days when a seed I had planted in secret walked back into my life as a healer. Benjamin looked toward the hallway where Linda was already speaking quickly into her headset. When I got accepted to college, I was terrified, he said. Everyone celebrated like the hard part was over, but I still had no money for housing, no laptop, no clothes for interviews, no one to tell me how to live in a world that used words I didn't understand. He paused. Mrs. Caldwell made me a folder. I laughed softly despite myself. Oh, I made folders for everyone. Yes, ma'am, but mine had everything. Bus schedules, scholarship deadlines, a list of professors to contact, a handwritten note that said, when you feel ashamed to ask questions, remember that ignorance is temporary, but pride can become permanent. A man near the back whispered, My God. Benjamin's voice dropped. I kept that note in my wallet until it fell apart. I could not stop crying then. Not loudly, not dramatically, just a steady spilling over, as if years of being unseen had finally found a door. Ethan knelt beside my chair. In front of everyone. "Mom," he said, his voice breaking. I didn't know. I touched his cheek because despite everything, he was still my son. "I know." "No." He shook his head. I should have known. That was different. The room seemed to hear it too. Olivia took half a step back as if the words had struck her without naming her. Benjamin did not look at her, but his next words found her anyway. "People like Mrs. Caldwell rarely announce their worth. That makes it easy for careless people to underestimate them." The sentence hung in the air. Olivia's face turned scarlet. No one laughed now. No one smiled, because everyone understood. Benjamin looked at me again, and his expression softened. "She taught me that healing begins long before a hospital. It begins when someone looks at a child the world has dismissed and says, 'I see you. Stay.'" The string quartet had stopped playing completely. Even the lobby staff stood still. Linda returned, breathless but composed. "The board chair agrees," she said. "The program will open with a special recognition. Dr. Hayes, they're ready when you are." Benjamin nodded. Then he extended his hand to me. "Will you walk in with me?" My first instinct was fear. I looked toward the ballroom doors, where hundreds of people waited under chandeliers. Important people, wealthy people, educated people. People Olivia had spent all week preparing to impress. "I don't belong on that stage," I whispered. Benjamin's eyes held mine. "You belong there, before they built it." My breath caught. Ethan stood slowly wiping his face. "Mom, please." I looked at him, then at Olivia. For the first time all evening, she did not correct me, guide me, or tell me where to stand. She simply stared at me with an expression I could not yet name. Maybe shock, maybe shame, maybe the first small crack of understanding. I placed my hand in Benjamin's. My knees hurt when I stood. My back ached. My navy dress was old, and the borrowed shawl slipped slightly from my shoulder. But as Benjamin helped me toward the ballroom doors, the people in the lobby parted. Not because I was wealthy. Not because I was fashionable. Not because Olivia approved. They parted because a life of quiet service had finally been called by its proper name. And as the doors opened to the glittering ballroom, I heard Benjamin whisper beside me, "Let them see you, Mrs. Caldwell." So I lifted my head, and I walked in. When Benjamin Hayes led me through those ballroom doors, every conversation inside seemed to loosen and fall quiet, one table at a time. The ballroom was breathtaking in a way that made me feel even more aware of my old navy dress. Crystal chandeliers spilled light over round tables dressed in white linen. Tall arrangements of roses and eucalyptus stood at the center of each table. Along one wall, a large screen displayed the St. Andrew Medical Center logo above the words, "Annual Charity Gala, Healing Communities Building Futures." People had already begun taking their seats. Some were laughing. Some were checking phones. Some were leaning close over plates of salad, speaking in the low, confident voices of people accustomed to expensive rooms. But when Benjamin entered with my hand resting in his, the air changed. Heads turned. Chairs shifted. A few people started to clap, uncertain at first, then louder, when they realized the chief surgeon was guiding an elderly woman toward the front of the room, as if she were the honored guest. I wanted to pull my hand away, not because I was ashamed of Benjamin. Never that. But because the attention felt too bright, like stepping from shade into full sun after years indoors. "Benjamin?" I whispered. This is too much. He leaned toward me without slowing. No, ma'am. This is overdue. Linda Brooks hurried ahead of us to the podium. I saw her speak quickly to a gray-haired man seated at the front table. He looked startled, then turned to stare at me. A moment later, he stood and buttoned his jacket. The board chair, I guessed. Ethan walked behind me close enough that I could hear his uneven breathing. Olivia followed at his side, though for once she did not try to guide the moment. Her silver gown still shimmered, but she seemed smaller now, as if the light no longer knew what to do with her. At the front of the ballroom, Benjamin stopped beside the stage steps. You don't have to speak yet, he said softly, yet his mouth curved. I know you, Mrs. Caldwell. Once you hear me exaggerate, you'll want to correct the record. Despite my nerves, I laughed. It was the first real laugh I had given all evening. He helped me into a chair near the front table. Ethan sat beside me quickly, as if afraid someone else might take the place. Olivia hesitated, then sat on Ethan's other side. Her eyes flicked over the room. I could almost hear her thoughts racing. Who had seen what? Who had heard what? How much damage had already been done? For once, I did not feel responsible for saving her from discomfort. Linda stepped to the podium and tapped the microphone. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for your patience. Tonight's program will begin a little differently than planned. A murmur moved through the room. Linda glanced toward Benjamin, then toward me. Every year, this gala honors physicians, donors, board members, and community partners who help St. Andrew serve patients beyond the walls of this hospital. But sometimes, the roots of healing reach farther back than any of us realize. My hands tightened around the napkin in my lap. Ethan leaned closer. Mom, are you all right? I nodded, though my heart was pounding. Linda continued. A few moments ago, Dr. Benjamin Hayes recognized someone in our lobby. Someone whose name many of us at the foundation know from old records, old scholarship files, and a legacy of giving that was never meant to attract applause. Olivia turned her head sharply toward me. Old records, scholarship files. Her expression shifted from embarrassment to alarm, as if she had just realized Benjamin's story might not be the full extent of what she did not know. Linda smiled through emotion. Before our formal keynote, Dr. Hayes has asked to share a personal tribute. Applause rose as Benjamin walked to the podium. He looked like a man built for that stage. Calm, respected, powerful. But when he placed both hands on the podium and looked at me, his face softened into something deeply human. I had a prepared speech tonight, he began. It was 12 minutes long, carefully edited, and probably respectable enough to keep everyone awake until dessert. A gentle laugh moved through the ballroom. But then I saw Mrs. Richard Caldwell in the lobby. Every eye turned toward me. I wanted to disappear and stand taller at the same time. That name may not mean much to some of you yet, Benjamin said. But to me, it is the name written across the doorway between who I was and who I became. The room quieted. Beside me, Ethan lowered his head. Benjamin told the story again, but this time with more detail. He spoke of Mill Creek High School of poverty that made ordinary dreams feel arrogant of grief after his mother's death, of anger that nearly swallowed him. He spoke of my classroom, my old desk, with one drawer that never closed properly, the cracked chalkboard the after-school hours when he would pretend to need help with essays because he did not want to go home. Then he looked across the ballroom. Mrs. Caldwell never made rescue look dramatic. She didn't sweep into a room announcing that she was saving anyone. She corrected your grammar, handed you a sandwich, made you rewrite a paragraph, and somehow by the end of the day, you believed tomorrow was still worth showing up for. A few people laughed softly. I felt tears burn again. She paid my exam fees. She found scholarship applications before the internet made everything easy. She wrote letters until her hands cramped. She drove me to interviews in an old station wagon that made a sound like a lawnmower fighting for its life. This time, I laughed with everyone else. "That car was loyal," I murmured. Ethan gave a broken little smile. Benjamin's voice grew deeper. "And she did not do this for me alone. I thought I was special." Years later, I learned I was one of many. Nurses, teachers, social workers, engineers, veterans, parents. People scattered across this country whose lives carry her fingerprints. The board chair looked at Linda. Linda nodded as if confirming it. Olivia sat very still. I could feel her shame beside me like heat from a stove. Then Benjamin said something I was not prepared for. "Some of you may know that St. Andrew's Community Scholarship Initiative began 22 years ago with a private contribution from an anonymous retired educator in Kentucky. The amount was modest by institutional standards, but the intention behind it was extraordinary. That educator asked for one thing only, that the money be used for students who had ability, but no advocate." A small sound escaped Ethan. I turned to him. His eyes were wide. "Mom!" I looked down. I had not wanted him to find out this way. Benjamin continued. "That educator was Mrs. Richard Caldwell." Applause broke out again, stronger now. I shook my head slightly. It was too much, too public, too exposed. Olivia whispered, barely audible, "You donated to St. Andrew." I did not answer. Not yet, because Benjamin was still speaking. I asked her once when I was young and arrogant and thought success meant being praised loudly, why she never wanted recognition. She said, "Benjamin, if you plant a tree, you don't stand beside it every day demanding fruit. You just hope someday somebody rests in the shade." The room rose to its feet. Not everyone at once, but quickly enough that the sound of chairs moving filled the ballroom. People stood clapping, turning toward me, some with tears on their faces. A standing ovation for me. Richard Caldwell. A woman whose daughter-in-law had told her not to wander. A woman who had eaten soup alone in her room while guests laughed downstairs. A woman who had spent months trying not to be inconvenient. I could not stand at first. My legs felt weak. Ethan rose and offered his arm, but Benjamin stepped down from the stage and offered his too. Between my son and the man who once had been my student, I stood. The applause grew louder. I pressed one hand to my heart. I did not know how to receive it. Teachers are trained to pour out, not be filled. Mothers, too. We learn to clap for everyone else to take pictures from the back row, to pack lunches, sign checks, sit up with fevers, and disappear so someone younger can shine. But that night, the light was on me, and for once, I did not step away from it. Benjamin returned to the microphone. "Mrs. Caldwell, would you honor us with a few words?" My stomach dropped. I shook my head immediately. "No?" I whispered. Ethan leaned close. "Mom, you don't have to." Olivia looked forward, her face pale. I expected her to whisper some warning, some instruction, some desperate attempt to control what I might say, but she said nothing. That silence gave me courage. Benjamin waited at the podium, patient as ever. I thought of my students, of the children who had stood in front of classrooms afraid to read aloud, afraid of being laughed at, afraid their voices would betray them. How many times had I told them, "Stand up. Take your time. The room can wait." Now the room was waiting for me. I stepped away from Ethan's arm. My knees hurt as I walked to the podium. Benjamin met me halfway and helped me up the steps. When I reached the microphone, the ballroom blurred beneath the chandeliers. Faces upon faces. Strangers. Important people. My son. My daughter-in-law. And somewhere inside me, beneath the shaking, I felt the teacher return. I adjusted the microphone. The room fell silent. "I wasn't expecting to speak tonight," I said. My voice trembled, but it held. I was actually told not to tell old teaching stories unless someone asked. A ripple moved through the room. Not quite laughter, not quite shock. Olivia closed her eyes. I did not look at her for long, but since Dr. Hayes asked, I continued, "I suppose I have permission." This time, there was gentle laughter. I took a breath. I spent most of my life teaching young people who had been underestimated. Some were poor. Some were angry. Some had lost parents. Some had parents who were present in body, but absent in every way that mattered. Many of them came to school already carrying more than any child should carry. My voice steadied, and I learned something from them. People do not become worthless just because others fail to recognize their value. The ballroom was completely still. I saw Ethan wipe his face. I saw Olivia lower her head. I looked out at the crowd and felt the old navy dress against my skin, the borrowed shawl slipping again, my hands wrinkled on the podium. Then I said the truth I had swallowed for too long. Sometimes the people who look ordinary are the very people who held someone else's world together. I let that sentence rest in the ballroom because some truths need silence around them. Sometimes the people who look ordinary are the very people who held someone else's world together. No one clapped at first. No one moved. I saw faces lifted toward me beneath the chandeliers. Wealthy donors, surgeons, board members, women in gowns worth more than my first carmen who had likely never worried about choosing between groceries and a utility bill. But in that moment, they were not titles or bank accounts. They were simply people being asked to remember someone who had helped them once, someone they might have overlooked, someone whose quiet sacrifice had made their own comfort possible. I held the sides of the podium to steady my hands. When I was teaching, I continued, I never thought of myself as heroic. Most teachers don't. We count pencils. We chase missing assignments. We call homes where nobody answers. We sit beside children who pretend not to care because caring has disappointed them too many times. A few people nodded. I looked at Benjamin, and sometimes, if we are blessed, we get to live long enough to see one of those children become a man who heals hearts for a living. Benjamin lowered his head, overcome. But I want you to understand something I said. Dr. Hayes did not become who he is because I rescued him. He became who he is because there was greatness in him already. My job was only to stand close enough until he could see it too. That was what I believed, truly. No teacher creates worth in a child. We reveal what neglect, poverty, shame, and fear have buried. I looked toward Ethan then. My son's face was wet with tears. He sat forward, elbows on his knees, as if every word cost him something. Olivia sat beside him still as a statue. Her hands were folded tightly in her lap, the knuckles pale. I could have punished her then. The room had given me the power. One sentence would have done it. One clear mention of how she had mocked me in the lobby, how she had told me not to wander, how she had laughed about my old teaching stories, and every head in that ballroom would have turned toward her with judgment. But power is a dangerous thing when it finally comes to someone who has been humiliated. I had taught too long to mistake public shame for justice, so I did not say her name. Instead, I said, "We live in a world that teaches people to measure value by noise, by money, by clothes, by whose name is printed on invitations, by who gets the best seat at the table." The room stayed silent, but many of the people who shaped us were not sitting at the head table. They were in kitchens, classrooms, hospital rooms, church basements, school buses, and second jobs. They were packing lunches they could barely afford. They were staying late after everyone else left. They were wearing old shoes so someone younger could have new ones. They were going without applause. My voice trembled, but I did not stop. And sometimes, when those people grow old, the world begins to treat them as if their usefulness has expired. A woman near the front pressed a napkin to her eyes. I heard Ethan inhale sharply. I looked down at my hands on the podium. These hands are wrinkled now. They shake sometimes. They drop things. They cannot open jars as easily as they once did. But these hands graded papers by lamplight. These hands held my husband's hand when he was dying. These hands signed college forms for my son. These hands wrote letters for children who needed someone official to say, "This child matters." My throat tightened. So when you see old hands, do not assume they are empty. They may be carrying whole histories you never bothered to ask about. That time, the applause came in a soft wave. I waited until it faded. Benjamin stood near the side of the stage, his eyes shining. Linda Brooks was crying openly now. The board chair had removed his glasses and was wiping them slowly, though they did not appear dirty. I took another breath. I am grateful for this honor, but I also want to say something plainly. Respect should not depend on discovery. A person should not have to be recognized by an important doctor before their family treats them with dignity. The words went through the room like a bell. Olivia flinched. I did not look away from the audience, but I knew she had heard me. More importantly, I knew Ethan had heard me. I do not say that to accuse anyone, I continued. I say it because many people my age know what it feels like to become invisible in rooms we helped build. We know what it feels like to be corrected, like children dismissed, like burdens tolerated instead of cherished. The ballroom was so quiet, I could hear the faint hum of the sound system, and some of us learned to smile through it because we do not want to cause trouble. We tell ourselves our children are busy. We tell ourselves the younger generation does not mean harm. We tell ourselves that if we stay useful enough, gentle enough, quiet enough, there will still be a place for us. My eyes burned. But love that requires you to disappear is not love. It is convenience. Ethan covered his face with one hand. Olivia stared down at her lap. I softened my voice. Still, I believe people can change. I have to believe that. I was a teacher. My whole profession was built on the belief that a person's worst day, worst mistake, or worst attitude does not have to be the final sentence of their story. I looked at Olivia then. Not harshly, not triumphantly, just honestly. Her eyes lifted to mine, and for the first time since I had moved into her house, I saw no smirk there, no polish, no performance. Only a woman cornered by truth. I looked back at the room. When I taught, I used to tell my students that dignity is not something the world gives you. It is something you must remember when the world forgets. Tonight, Dr. Hayes remembered me. St. Andrew remembered me, and I am grateful beyond words. I paused. But I want every person in this room to leave tonight and remember someone else. An old teacher, a grandmother, a janitor, a nurse, a neighbor, a parent who sacrificed quietly, someone whose name may never appear on a banner, but whose life became a bridge for others. Benjamin pressed his fingers to his mouth. Call them, I said. Thank them. Sit with them. Ask them who they were before age made them slow. Ask them what they gave up. Ask them what still hurts. Do not wait until a public moment teaches you what private love should have already known. That was when my voice finally broke. I stepped back slightly from the microphone. For a moment, I thought I was finished. Then I saw a memory as clear as if it were happening in front of me. Benjamin, at graduation, thin shoulders under a borrowed gown, clutching his diploma, like it might vanish if he loosened his grip. Ethan at 5 years old, asleep on the couch with a toy truck in one hand. Samuel standing in our kitchen counting bills, saying, "We'll make it work, Richard. We always do." All the love, all the sacrifice, all the years that had passed without asking to be praised. I leaned toward the microphone one last time. If my life has taught me anything, it is this: never underestimate what quiet kindness can build. You may not see the result tomorrow. You may not see it for 20 years. But somewhere, someone will carry your kindness into a room you never enter, and the world will be better because you once cared. The ballroom rose again. This time, the applause was not simply loud. It was alive. People stood with tears on their faces. Some placed hands over their hearts. Others clapped slowly, reverently, as if the room had become something sacred. Benjamin came to the podium and wrapped both arms around me. I held him tightly, no longer caring who saw. "My first mentor," he whispered. "My dear boy," I whispered back. When he helped me down from the stage, Ethan was waiting at the bottom. He did not speak at first. He simply took my hands and bowed his head over them, like a man asking forgiveness in a language older than words. Behind him, Olivia stood trembling. Her makeup was no longer perfect. Tears had cut thin lines through the careful finish on her face. For once, she looked less like a woman trying to impress the room and more like someone who had finally seen herself clearly. But I was too tired to carry her guilt for her. Benjamin guided me back to my seat, and the program continued around us, though nothing felt the same afterward. Awards were announced, donations were pledged, plates were served, but people kept coming to our table one by one to shake my hand, to thank me, to tell me about teachers who had saved them too. And each time Olivia heard someone say, "Mrs. Caldwell, what an honor," she lowered her eyes, not because I had exposed her, because I had not. That was the part that seemed to hurt her most. By the time dessert was served, I understood that the evening had become something none of us could put back the way it had been. The ballroom still looked the same. The candles still burned inside glass holders. The waiters still moved between tables with silver trays. The hospital banners still hung from the walls, promising healing excellence and community. But around our table, the air had changed so completely that even the clinking of forks sounded careful. People kept coming to me. A retired nurse clasped my hands and told me about a teacher who had paid for her first nursing exam. A young resident said, "My grandmother raised me. I need to call her tonight." A hospital board member leaned down and said, "Mrs. Caldwell, I hope you understand what your words meant to this room." I thanked them all because I did not know what else to do. Ethan stayed close to me, almost too close, like a child afraid his mother might vanish. Every time someone approached, he straightened with a mixture of pride and guilt on his face. Olivia sat beside him, barely touching her food. The silver gown that had made her look so powerful when we arrived now seemed like armor she no longer knew how to wear. Finally, when there was a pause, she turned to me. Her voice was low. "Richard, I didn't know about the scholarship fund." I looked at my coffee cup. "No. Why didn't you say something?" I lifted my eyes to hers. "When would I have said it?" "Olivia?" The question was gentle, but it landed hard. She looked down at the tablecloth. Ethan exhaled as if the same question had struck him too. Before anyone could answer, Linda Brooks returned to our table with a leather folder pressed against her chest. Dr. Hayes came with her, along with the gray-haired board chair, whose name I had learned was Thomas Whitaker. "Mrs. Caldwell." Linda said, "May we sit for a moment?" "Of course." They took the empty chairs across from me. Benjamin remained standing behind Linda's chair, one hand resting on the back of it. Thomas Whitaker leaned forward. Mrs. Caldwell, I want to apologize. Until tonight, I knew your name only from Foundation history. I did not realize you would be here. I smiled faintly. Neither did I. That brought a small laugh, but it faded quickly. Linda opened the leather folder. I hope this isn't overwhelming, she said. But after Dr. Hayes recognized you, I pulled the old digital records. Some had been archived, but your name appears in more than one place. Olivia looked up sharply. Ethan frowned. What do you mean? Linda placed a page on the table. At first, there was the Caldwell Educator Contribution. It began 22 years ago with a donation marked for applicants from rural or underserved school districts. The donor requested anonymity. I touched the edge of the paper. I remembered sending that check. It had not been a large check by the standards of people in that ballroom. It had been the money left after Samuel's life insurance settled and Ethan's final tuition payment cleared. I had sat at my kitchen table for nearly an hour, looking at the checkbook, thinking about replacing the roof, about buying a better car, about saving for the kind of retirement people recommended in magazines. Then I thought of Benjamin. Not only Benjamin, but all the children who had ability and no one to open doors. I wrote the check before fear could talk me out of it. Ethan stared at the page. Mom, this amount? I gently covered the number with my fingers. Amounts are not the important part. His eyes filled again. It was to you. I did not deny it. Linda continued carefully. The first donation helped support 3 students. One of them became Dr. Hayes. Another became a pediatric nurse in Tennessee. The third became a public health administrator in Ohio. Benjamin smiled softly. I knew about 2 of them, not the third. Linda turned another page. Then, over the years, smaller contributions continued. Some were personal checks. Some came through matching gifts after former students donated in your honor. Former students donated in your honor. Eventually, the foundation began referring internally to the account as the Caldwell Mentorship Fund, though we never used the name publicly because of your original anonymity request. Eventually, the foundation began referring internally to the account as the Caldwell Mentorship Fund, though we never used the name publicly because of your original anonymity request. Olivia's lips parted. The Caldwell Mentorship Fund, she whispered. Thomas nodded. It has assisted 47 students over the years. The number seemed to float above the table. 47. I had known there were students. I had received occasional letters from the foundation, updates without names, general reports written in careful language. But 47 was more than I had imagined. 47 lives, 47 families, 47 futures touched by a decision I had made alone at a scratched kitchen table. My breath caught. Benjamin's hand came gently to my shoulder again. Linda's voice softened. Several recipients later donated back into the fund after establishing careers. That means your first gift did not end where you placed it. It multiplied. I closed my eyes. For years, Olivia had looked at me as if I brought nothing into her home. No money worth admiring, no influence worth mentioning, no modern polish, no status. And all the while, something I had given away decades earlier had been growing beyond us all. Ethan whispered, "Why didn't you tell me?" I turned to him. Because by the time I thought you were old enough to understand, your life was busy. College, work, marriage, your father's illness, then grief. Then years passed, and maybe I paused, swallowing the ache in my throat. Maybe I thought if I had to tell my own son I had mattered, it would hurt more than staying quiet. Ethan flinched. I had not meant to wound him, but truth has a blade even when held gently. He pushed back from the table and stood. I need a minute, Ethan. But he was already walking toward the side exit. One hand pressed to his mouth. Olivia half rose, then stopped. For once she looked uncertain whether she had the right to follow him. Benjamin looked at me. Should I? I shook my head. Let him breathe. Linda slowly closed the folder. There's one more thing, she said. The table fell quiet again. Thomas Whitaker adjusted his glasses. Before tonight, the board had planned to announce an expansion of the scholarship initiative, but the naming decision was still under discussion. I felt a strange stillness move through me. Linda smiled through tears. After what happened tonight, Dr. Hayes made a recommendation. The board chair agreed to bring it forward immediately. Benjamin said, "We want the expanded fund to carry your name publicly." My heart lurched. No, the word came out before I could soften it. Benjamin smiled as if he had expected nothing else. Yes, Benjamin, I gave anonymously for a reason. I know. I don't want people thinking I did it for recognition. No one who heard you tonight would think that. I looked toward Olivia, then toward the ballroom full of guests, still talking in lowered voices. Recognition felt dangerous. It asked old humility to step into unfamiliar clothes. It made me afraid people would misunderstand the sacred privacy of giving. Yet deep under that fear, another truth stirred. Maybe anonymity had protected me. Maybe it had also hidden a legacy my own family needed to see. Thomas spoke gently. Mrs. Caldwell, names on funds are not only about praise, they are signposts. They tell future students what kind of life opened the door for them. Linda added, and there are young people who need mentors as much as money. Your story could become part of how we reach them. I pressed my hand to my chest. My story? Benjamin nodded. Your story. For most of my life, my story had been something I carried quietly while helping others write theirs. I had never imagined it could become a door. Olivia suddenly stood. Her chair scraped softly against the floor. I'm sorry, she said. I need to check on Ethan. No one stopped her. But before she walked away, she looked at me. Really looked at me. Her eyes were red, but her voice remained formal, almost careful. Richard, I'm sorry. It was not enough. Not yet. But it was the first apology she had ever offered without adding a defense behind it. I nodded once. She left the table and followed Ethan toward the side exit. Benjamin watched her go, then looked back at me. Are you all right? I gave a tired smile. I'm old enough to be many things at once. He laughed softly. That sounds like something you'd write in red ink on my essay. I would have circled many things and asked you to be more specific. His laugh deepened, and for a moment we were back in my classroom before tuxedos and chandeliers and public applause. Linda slid the leather folder toward me. You don't have to decide tonight. But we would be honored to establish the Richard Caldwell Mentorship Fund publicly with your permission. I looked at my name on the page, Richard Caldwell, a name my father had given me because he expected a son, a name people had questioned my whole life, a name Olivia had used with impatience, embarrassment, and mockery. Now that same name sat in a foundation folder tied to 47 students and more to come. The irony nearly made me smile. Across the ballroom, I saw Olivia near the side doors. Ethan stood with his back to her shoulders shaking. She reached for him, then stopped short, as if learning that comfort could not be demanded on command. That was when I understood the night's real twist. The greatest shock was not that Benjamin remembered me. It was that my own family had forgotten me, while strangers preserved my name. I placed my palm over the folder. I'll think about it, I said. Benjamin nodded, satisfied for now. But as the gala continued and the whispers spread from table to table, I knew something had already changed. My old life had stepped into the room and taken a seat beside my present one. And Olivia, who had thought I was an embarrassment, had just discovered I was part of the very legacy she had come there to impress. I found Ethan outside the ballroom, near a quiet hallway, lined with donor portraits. He stood with one hand against the wall. His head bowed his shoulders, moving in small, uneven breaths. Olivia stood several feet behind him, frozen in that helpless space between wanting to comfort someone and knowing you may be one of the reasons they are broken. When Ethan saw me, he straightened too quickly. "Mom," he said, wiping his face. "You shouldn't be walking around alone." I almost smiled. After months of being treated like an inconvenience, suddenly everyone was worried about me crossing a hallway. "I've been walking alone for many years, honey." The words were not meant to wound him, but he looked as though they did. Benjamin had offered to come with me, but I asked him to stay inside. This was not a conversation for applause donors or hospital lights. This was a conversation between a mother and the son who had forgotten she was more than the old woman in his guest room. Olivia looked at me, her eyes red. "Richard, I can leave if you want privacy." I studied her for a moment. Part of me wanted to say yes. Part of me wanted her to stand there and hear every word. Not because I wanted revenge, but because truth had lived too long behind closed doors in our family. "Stay," I said quietly. "You're part of this too." She nodded once and folded her arms around herself. Ethan pressed his palm over his eyes. "I don't even know where to start." "Then start with what hurts." He let out a broken laugh. "Everything." I moved to a bench beneath a portrait of an old surgeon whose painted eyes seemed too serious for the moment. My knees were aching from the stage and the standing ovations and the weight of being seen all at once. Ethan immediately stepped toward me. "Careful." I sat down before he could take my elbow. "I'm not made of glass, Ethan." He lowered himself beside me, leaving a few inches of space, as if he no longer trusted his right to sit close. For a long moment, none of us spoke. From the ballroom, faint applause rose, then faded. Someone was giving another award. The evening continued as life does, even when one family is coming apart in a hallway. Ethan stared at his hands. "I remember the station wagon," he said suddenly. I turned toward him. "The blue one. The heater didn't work unless you hit the dashboard." That car had personality. It had duct tape on the passenger mirror. It was loyal duct tape. He smiled, but his mouth trembled. "I was embarrassed by it," he admitted. "When you dropped me off at school, I'd ask you to stop half a block away. I remember. You never got angry. I knew what it was like to be young and want the world to see you differently." His face crumpled. I thought we were just normal. Not rich, not poor. Just normal. I didn't understand what you and Dad were doing. Children aren't supposed to understand every sacrifice while it's happening. But I stopped being a child a long time ago. That was the first honest sentence he had spoken all night. He looked at me then, and I saw the little boy and the grown man fighting inside the same face. "Did you really sell Dad's truck to help with my college deposit?" I looked down, so he had remembered something. "Your father wanted to sell it." "No, he loved that truck. He loved you more." Ethan covered his mouth. The memory came back to me painfully clear. Samuel in the driveway, running his hand along the side of that old Ford, pretending it was just a vehicle, not the last thing he had bought for himself before medical bills and tuition swallowed our lives. He had smiled at Ethan and said, "I'm thinking of getting something smaller anyway." But later that night, I found him sitting at the kitchen table with the keys in his hand. "We'll make it work," he had said. "We always said that." We made everything work until there was little left of us but love and exhaustion. Ethan's voice shook. "I used to tell people I paid my own way." I did not answer. He winced because silence sometimes confirms more than words. I said it because I was proud, he whispered. Because I wanted to believe I built everything myself. Engineering school, my career, the house. I thought admitting how much help I had made me smaller. I reached for his hand. No, Ethan. Gratitude does not make a man smaller. He held my hand with both of his. I let Olivia talk down to you. Olivia made a small sound behind us. Ethan turned toward her, but he did not soften the sentence. I heard it, he said. Not all of it, but enough. The jokes, the corrections, the way you made Mom feel like a guest we were tired of hosting. Tears filled Olivia's eyes again. Ethan? No, he said. Let me say it. I kept telling myself it wasn't serious, that you were stressed, that Mom didn't mind, that keeping peace was better than creating conflict. He looked back at me. But peace for me meant pain for you. That sentence opened something in my chest. For months, I had waited for him to see it, not perfectly, not dramatically, just enough to know I was not imagining the small humiliations. Enough to know my son still had a moral spine beneath the comfort he had chosen. Yes, I said softly. It did. His eyes filled over. I'm sorry, Mom. There it was. Not the rushed apology people offer to end discomfort. Not the polite apology of a man trying to move on. This one came from somewhere deep enough to cost him. I am so sorry, he said again. For the dinners you ate alone. For the times I looked away. For letting you feel like you had to earn space in my home. For not asking who you were before you became my mother. I squeezed his hand. You knew parts of me. Not enough. No child knows all of a parent. Maybe not, he said. But a decent son should try. Olivia began crying quietly now, one hand pressed to her mouth. Ethan stood and faced her. And you, he said, his voice not cruel but firm, owe her more than one whispered apology at a gala. Olivia nodded quickly. I know. I don't think you do. She flinched. He continued. You were ashamed of her tonight. Olivia's tears spilled over. Yes. The honesty startled me. Ethan stared at her. She swallowed hard. I was. I hate saying it, but I was. I thought about how she would look beside us, how she would talk, whether people would think we were less polished because she was there. Her voice broke. And then Dr. Hayes looked at her like she was the most important person in the building. I sat very still. Olivia looked at me then, and all the pride had drained from her face. I don't know what that says about me, she whispered. It says you have work to do, I replied. She nodded, crying harder. Ethan turned back toward me. Mom, come home with us tonight. Please, we'll fix this. Those words, come home, should have comforted me. Instead, they made me tired, because the house he meant had never become my home. It had been a place where my boxes were too many, my stories too long, my habits too old, my presence conditional on convenience. I loved my son. But love cannot live well in a room where dignity has to knock first. Ethan, I said gently, we cannot fix in one night what we allowed to grow for months. His face went pale. What are you saying? I'm saying I will come back tonight because my things are there, but I don't know if I can keep living there. Olivia covered her mouth. Ethan shook his head. Mom, no. Please, I'll talk to her. We'll change the room. This is not about the room. He stopped. It is not about drawers or dresses or whether Olivia lets me use the cast iron pan. I took a breath. It is about waking every morning in a house where I measure my words so I won't irritate someone. It is about hearing laughter through the floor while I eat alone. It is about becoming smaller so everyone else can stay comfortable. Ethan's shoulders fell. I did that to you. You allowed it. The distinction mattered. He nodded slowly, tears slipping down his face. Olivia stepped forward. Richard, I don't expect forgiveness tonight, but please don't leave because of me. I looked at her. I would not be leaving because of you alone. I would be leaving because of what I forgot about myself while trying to survive you. She closed her eyes as if the words had struck her cleanly. From the ballroom, Benjamin appeared at the hallway entrance. He did not interrupt. He only stood there watching with the quiet concern of someone ready to help if asked. Ethan saw him and wiped his face embarrassed. Benjamin said softly, "They're about to announce the final pledge total." "We'll be there in a minute," I said. He nodded and disappeared again. Ethan looked at me with panic rising. "Where would you go? I don't know yet. I can find you an apartment. I can pay no. But Mom, I am not asking to be rescued. I am asking to be respected." He fell silent. I softened my voice. "I have some savings, more than you think, apparently less hidden than I imagined." I gave a tired smile. "And I have friends I have not called because I was too embarrassed to admit I was lonely." Ethan bowed his head. "I don't want to lose you." "You are not losing me," I said. "You are losing the version of me that stayed quiet so you would not have to feel guilty." That was the truth at the center of it all. He reached for my hand again. Can I earn my way back? The question broke my heart a little, because he was not asking for instant forgiveness. He was asking for a road. "Yes," I said, "but not with tears tonight, with choices tomorrow, and the day after that, and the day after that." He nodded, clinging to every word. Olivia whispered, "Can I?" I looked at her for a long moment. "I don't know yet." She accepted that. Maybe that was the first sign of change. When we returned to the ballroom, the gala was nearing its end. Benjamin stood on stage beside Linda Brooks, while the final pledge total flashed on the screen. The amount was enormous. People applauded, cheered, celebrated, but I barely heard it. Ethan walked beside me, not ahead of me. Olivia walked behind us, quiet and shaken. And for the first time since moving into their house, I did not feel like a burden being brought along. I felt like a woman deciding where she belonged. I thought the hardest part of that night had ended when we left the ballroom. I was wrong. By the time we returned to Ethan and Olivia's house, it was nearly midnight. The rain had stopped, leaving the driveway slick beneath the porch lights. The neighborhood was quiet, every large home tucked behind trimmed hedges and sleeping windows. It looked peaceful from the outside, the way many houses do before you step inside and feel what has been living in the walls. No one spoke much in the car. Ethan drove with both hands on the wheel, his jaw tight, his eyes fixed on the road. Olivia sat beside him, staring out the passenger window. I sat in the back with Linda's folder on my lap, though I had not meant to bring it home. Benjamin had insisted. "Read it when you're ready," he had said. "Not for them, for you." So I carried it like something fragile. Inside the house, Olivia turned on only the kitchen lights. The bright white counters gleamed exactly as they had that morning, but nothing felt the same. My purse sat on the island. Ethan's keys landed beside it with a sharp metallic sound. For a moment, we stood there like strangers after a storm. Then Ethan said, "We need to talk." Olivia closed her eyes. "I know. I was exhausted down to my bones. My knees throbbed. My head ached from tears, applause, memories, and too many faces turning toward me. All I wanted was to take off the borrowed shawl, hang up the navy dress, and sit alone in silence. But truth, once awakened, does not always let you sleep. Ethan pulled out a chair for me at the kitchen table. I looked at it then, at him. Months earlier, I had sat at that same table while Olivia corrected how I buttered toast, how I folded napkins, how I spoke to delivery men, how I placed mugs in the cabinet. Tonight, Ethan pulled out the chair like he was inviting a guest of honor. The difference hurt more than I expected. I sat. Olivia remained standing near the sink, arms folded around herself. Ethan paced once across the kitchen, then stopped. I don't want us to pretend this was just an awkward evening. No one is pretending that, Olivia said quietly. You did earlier. For months, actually. She looked down. He turned to me. Mom. I should have asked before, but I'm asking now. What has been happening in this house when I wasn't paying attention? My first instinct was still to protect him. That is a mother's curse sometimes. Even when a child has failed you, you still want to cushion the truth so it does not bruise him too badly. But I had already spent too long making my pain digestible for other people. So I told him. Not dramatically, not with raised voice, just plainly. I told him about the first week when Olivia gave me 2 drawers and said the house needed to stay uncluttered. I told him about donating half my life because I felt ashamed of bringing too much of myself into her home. I told him about the dinner party where I had been asked to eat early in my room. I told him about hearing Olivia call me simple, harmless, like a grandmother from a museum. Ethan stopped pacing. Olivia pressed one hand to the counter. I continued. I told him about the cast iron pan, the chipped mug, the way Olivia introduced me as someone living with them, never as someone who belonged. The warnings before the gala, the whispered instructions, the way she told me not to talk about teaching stories unless someone asked. Each example sounded small by itself. That was how humiliation often worked. It came in teaspoons, not buckets, until one day you realized you were drowning quietly. Ethan's face changed with every sentence. By the time I finished, he looked older. He turned to Olivia. Is it true she did not defend herself? That surprised me. Yes, she whispered. Why? The word came out broken. Olivia sank into the chair across from me. She looked nothing like the woman who had swept down the stairs in a silver gown hours earlier. Her hair had loosened, her makeup was smudged, her face was bare in a way I had never seen before. I don't know how to explain it without sounding worse, she said. Try, Ethan replied. Olivia looked at me, then away. I grew up in a house where people judged everything she said. The car in the driveway, the clothes you wore, the schools you got into, whether your mother looked polished at school events, whether your house smelled like expensive candles or fried food. My mother used to say, people decide what you're worth before you open your mouth. Her voice shook. I hated living like that, but somehow I became fluent in it. I listened. I did not excuse her, but I listened. When Richard moved in, Olivia continued, I saw everything I was taught to fear. Aging, need, small-town habits, old clothes, a life that didn't look impressive on paper. And instead of questioning why that scared me, I tried to control her. Make her fit, make her quieter, make her less visible. Tears slid down her cheeks. And tonight, every person I wanted to impress admired her for the very things I looked down on. The kitchen went silent. Ethan sat heavily in the chair beside me. That doesn't fix what you did, he said. I know. Do you? Olivia nodded. crying harder. Yes. But then came the thing none of us expected. Ethan's phone buzzed on the island. Once, twice, then again. He ignored it at first, but Olivia's phone began buzzing too. Then mine, though almost no one texted me that late. Ethan picked up his phone and frowned. What is this? Olivia grabbed hers. The color drained from her face. Ethan. He looked at the screen. What? She did not answer. So he tapped the message. I watched his expression move from confusion to disbelief to anger. What video, he said. My stomach tightened. Olivia whispered, someone posted from the gala. Ethan played it. The sound came through his phone, small but clear. Olivia's voice. She's very excited. First time at something like this. Then another clip. She still says supper and pocketbook. Then another. I'm sorry. She doesn't always understand when we're teasing. The video had been edited together with footage of Benjamin embracing me afterward, calling me his first mentor. The room applauding me standing at the podium saying, respect should not depend on discovery. Someone had recorded everything. Not all of it, perhaps, but enough. Ethan stared at the screen. Olivia covered her mouth. The caption appeared beneath the video, Woman mocks elderly mother-in-law at hospital gala. Then famous surgeon reveals she changed his life. My hands went cold. No, I said, softly. Ethan looked at me. Mom? No, I don't want this. Olivia began shaking. I didn't know anyone was filming. That is your concern? Ethan snapped. No, She stopped crying. No. My phone buzzed again. It was a message from Benjamin. Please don't panic. I just saw the video. I'm calling hospital communications now. We'll try to contain this respectfully. Contain this? But the internet has never been known for mercy. Ethan scrolled, his face tightening. There are comments. Don't read them, I said. He read anyway. His mouth hardened. Olivia stood abruptly and moved toward the hallway, then stopped as if she had nowhere to go. They're calling me horrible things, she whispered. Ethan looked up. You said horrible things. I know she cried. I know I did. I know. Her voice cracked so sharply that for a moment even Ethan's anger faltered. I closed my eyes. This was the justice people imagine they want. Exposure, shame, public consequences, the arrogant humbled, the cruel named. But sitting at that table watching Olivia tremble as strangers tore into her through a screen, I felt no satisfaction. Only sorrow, because humiliation had not healed me when she gave it to me. It would not heal her now. Ethan, I said put the phone down. But Mom, people need to know. No. People know enough to become cruel. That is not the same as understanding. He froze. I turned to Olivia. She looked like a child waiting for punishment. You were wrong, I said. She nodded quickly. Yes, you were cruel. Yes, you made me feel unwelcome in a house where my son promised I would be safe. Her face crumpled. I'm sorry. I believe you are sorry tonight, I said. But being sorry because strangers caught you is not the same as being changed. She absorbed that like a sentence. Then I turned back to Ethan. And you, my son, do not get to use public outrage as a substitute for private courage. His eyes widened. I continued. Those strangers online did not fail me in this house. You did. The kitchen went completely still. Ethan looked down. You're right, he whispered. The video kept spreading. We could hear the phones buzzing on the counter like insects trapped under glass. Olivia whispered, What do I do? For once, she was not asking how to manage appearances. She sounded as if she truly did not know how to stand inside the wreckage of herself. I was tired. Too tired to carry her. Too tired to comfort my son. Too tired to be everyone's lesson and everyone's mirror. So I stood. Ethan rose immediately. Mom, I'm going to bed. But we need to figure out. You need to figure out, I said. Both of you. Olivia wiped her face. Richard, please let me apologize properly. Not tonight. She stepped back. I picked up Linda's folder and my purse. At the bottom of the stairs, I turned around. Ethan and Olivia stood in the kitchen beneath the harsh white lights, surrounded by the buzzing phones, the glittering remains of a night none of us would forget. One more thing, I said. They both looked at me. I do not want either of you defending me online to make yourselves look better. If you respond, respond with truth, not performance. Ethan nodded slowly. Olivia whispered, yes. I climbed the stairs one step at a time. In my room, I closed the door, took off the borrowed shawl, and folded it neatly over the chair. Then I opened the wooden chest at the foot of the bed. The old letters waited inside, quiet and faithful. I placed Linda's folder beside them. For the first time, my hidden past and my exposed present sat together. Downstairs, I heard muffled voices. Ethan's low and strained. Olivia's broken and small. Their marriage, their image, their comfort. Everything was being tested by truth. I sat on the edge of the bed and looked at Samuel's photograph. Well, I whispered. They finally saw me. But as tears filled my eyes again, I realized the cruelest part was not that strangers had seen my pain. It was that it had taken strangers seeing it for my own family to stop looking away. I did not sleep that night. I lay in the guest room listening to the house breathe around me, every sound suddenly sharper than before. A pipe clicked behind the wall. A car passed slowly outside. Somewhere downstairs, a cabinet opened and closed, then opened again. Ethan and Olivia were still awake, still moving through the wreckage of what had been exposed. My phone buzzed until I turned it face down. Messages came from numbers I had not seen in years. Former students, old colleagues, a woman from church in Kentucky, a cousin who rarely called unless someone died. Most messages were kind, though kindness can overwhelm a tired heart almost as much as cruelty. Mrs. Caldwell, is that really you in the video? You changed my life too. I never forgot what you did for my brother. Are you okay? That last question appeared again and again. Are you okay? I did not know how to answer. At dawn, I rose carefully, my knees stiff from the long night before. The room was pale blue with morning light. My navy dress hung from the closet door. Olivia's borrowed shawl lay folded on the chair. Linda's leather folder sat beside the wooden chest. Its presence quiet but undeniable. I made the bed. That was the first thing I did. Old habits. If the world was falling apart, at least the sheets could be straight. Then I opened the closet and looked at what remained of my life in that house. A few dresses, cardigans, sensible shoes, 2 drawers of folded clothes, a shoebox of photographs, Samuel's framed picture, the wooden chest full of letters, the Bible my mother had given me, a small stack of books. When I first moved in, I had believed losing most of my things would make me easier to accommodate. Now I understood something painful. I had not only given away furniture bowls, quilts, and lamps, I had given away evidence that I had ever had a whole life before entering that house. By 7, I had packed 1 suitcase. Not everything, just enough. When I carried it into the hallway, Ethan was standing at the top of the stairs. His eyes were swollen. He had not slept either. "Mom," he said, seeing the suitcase, "I'm not sneaking out." He looked as if the words hurt him. "Where are you going? Downstairs first. I need coffee." His mouth trembled, almost a smile, almost a sob. "I made some." In the kitchen, Olivia sat at the table wearing a plain gray sweatshirt, her hair tied back, her face scrubbed clean. Without makeup and careful posture, she looked younger, smaller, human in a way I had not allowed myself to see before. She stood when I entered. "Good morning," she said softly. "Good morning." Her eyes moved to the suitcase in Ethan's hand. She swallowed. "I understand," she whispered. I sat at the table. Ethan placed coffee in front of me, then remained standing, as if unsure whether he was allowed to sit near me. "Sit down, honey," I said. He did. For a moment, the three of us sat in a silence so fragile I was afraid the sound of a spoon might break it. Then Ethan said, "I called in sick. Olivia said I did too." I nodded. "I spoke with Benjamin this morning," Ethan continued. "He said the hospital communications team is asking people not to harass anyone involved. He posted a statement honoring you and asking for compassion." That sounded like Benjamin. Even as a boy, he had known the difference between accountability and cruelty, though he had learned it the hard way. Olivia's voice shook. "I didn't ask him to do that." "I know," Ethan said. She looked at me. "I won't defend myself publicly. I won't say I was misunderstood. I won't say the video was taken out of context. Was it no?" Her eyes filled. It showed exactly who I was being. I took a slow sip of coffee. That is a hard thing to admit. It should be hard. There was no self-pity in her voice this time. That mattered, not enough to repair what was broken, but enough to make me listen. Ethan leaned forward. "Mom, I know you said last night you might not stay here. I want to ask you not to decide while everything is raw." "I decided before the video," I said. His face fell. "I think I began deciding in small pieces for months. Last night only gave me the courage to admit it." Olivia closed her eyes. Ethan's voice cracked. "Please, let me make this right." "You can begin making it right," I said, "but not by convincing me to remain where I learned to disappear." He looked down. "I found a place," I continued. Both of them looked up. Ethan frowned. "What do you mean, I called someone before coming downstairs?" "Margaret Ellis." He looked down. "I found a place," I continued. Both of them looked up. Ethan frowned. "What do you mean, I called someone before coming downstairs?" "Margaret Ellis? My old colleague?" "Yes. She lives in Columbus now, not far from the community center on Grant Avenue. She has a friend who manages a small senior apartment building. There is a one-bedroom unit available next month." Ethan stared. "Next month I may stay with Margaret for a few days while I look at it." "No," he said immediately. "Mom, please, you don't have to go stay with someone else. This is your home." The words came too late. I let them sit between us. Then I said gently, "No, Ethan. It was your house. Olivia's home. My room." His eyes filled. Olivia bowed her head as if she deserved that. "Ethan said I should have made it your home." "Yes." He pressed his hand over his mouth. I reached across the table and touched his wrist. "I am not saying this to punish you. I am saying it because I still have time to choose peace." Olivia looked at me. "You deserve peace." I studied her. For the first time, I believed she meant it without thinking how the sentence would make her look. Ethan shook his head. Can I at least help you move? Find furniture? Pay the deposit. I smiled faintly. You may help. You may not take over. He nodded quickly. Okay. Yes. Whatever you want. That is a start, I said, asking what I want. The kitchen grew quiet again. Outside, morning sunlight touched the white cabinets, the polished counters, the vase of tulips Olivia had replaced twice a week, because freshness mattered to her. I wondered if she had ever understood that a home could be spotless and still feel unsafe. Olivia wiped her face. Richard, I need to say something, and I don't expect it to change your decision. I waited. When you moved in, I treated your presence like a threat to my image. But the truth is, you were a threat to my lies. I had built my whole identity around being refined, successful, respected. And you walked in with this quiet history of real goodness. I didn't recognize it, so I mocked it. Her voice broke. I am ashamed of myself. I watched her carefully. Shame can become a doorway or a hiding place. I did not yet know which one Olivia would choose. I can't forgive you fully today, I said. She nodded. I know, and I won't pretend everything is fine because you cried. I don't want you to. That answer surprised me. Ethan looked at her too, or surprised me. Ethan looked at her too. Olivia continued. I want to earn the right to be in your life differently, if you'll ever allow that. I took a breath. I will allow truth, respect, time. I will not allow performance. She nodded again. I understand. I stood slowly. Ethan rose to help, then stopped himself and simply asked, Do you want help? There it was, the smallest change but real. Yes, I said. You may carry the suitcase to the car. His face crumpled with gratitude and grief. Margaret arrived an hour later in a red Subaru, wearing jeans, a purple scarf, and the same fierce expression she had worn when confronting school administrators 30 years earlier. She hugged me so hard my ribs protested. Richard Caldwell, she said, pulling back to look at me. You always did know how to make an exit. I laughed, and it came out shaky. Ethan carried my suitcase to the car. Olivia stood on the porch, arms wrapped around herself. She did not ask me to stay. She did not force another apology. She simply stood there and let me leave, which may have been the first truly respectful thing she had done for me. Before getting into Margaret's car, I turned to Ethan. He looked terrified. I love you, I said. A tear slipped down his face. I love you too, Mom. This is not the end. He nodded, unable to speak. It is a beginning, I added. But beginnings require different choices. Then I looked at Olivia. She whispered, Thank you for not destroying me last night. I held her gaze. I was never interested in destroying you. I only wanted you to see me. Her lips trembled. I do now. I nodded once. Then I got into Margaret's car with my suitcase, my wooden chest, Samuel's photograph, and Linda's folder. As we pulled away, I looked back at the house where I had tried so hard to belong. Ethan stood in the driveway with one hand raised. Olivia stood a few steps behind him, crying silently. My heart hurt. But beneath the hurt was something I had not felt in months. Room. Room to breathe. Room to remember. Room to become Richard Caldwell again. Not someone's burden, not someone's embarrassment, not someone's viral lesson. Just myself. And sometimes, after years of shrinking, choosing yourself feels like the first honest prayer you have spoken in a long time. Margaret Ellis drove the way she had taught, fast, firm, and with no patience for hesitation. Her red Subaru cut through the morning traffic while I sat beside her holding Samuel's photograph in my lap. The wooden chest rested in the back seat, tucked safely under a quilt Margaret had thrown over it, so nosy people won't start wondering why an old lady is traveling with treasure. "You are treasure," she said when I raised an eyebrow. "I was going to say letters. Same thing." Same? That was Margaret. She had taught history 2 classrooms down from mine for 22 years, survived 3 principals, 1 tornado warning, a cafeteria fire, and more teenage heartbreak than either of us could count. Her hair was white now, cropped short, and she wore purple glasses on a chain around her neck, but her spirit had not aged a day. She glanced at me as we stopped at a red light. "You look like somebody who hasn't slept." "I haven't." "Good. Sleep is wasted on major life transitions." I laughed, despite myself. Then my face crumpled. Margaret reached over and squeezed my hand without looking surprised. Good friends do not panic when your strength finally leaks out. They simply make room for it. I cried from Ethan's neighborhood all the way to the older part of Columbus, where Margaret lived in a brick duplex with flower boxes, mismatched porch chairs, and a wind chime shaped like a hummingbird. It was not grand. It was not polished. It looked lived in. I loved it immediately. Inside the house smelled like coffee, lemon soap, and old books. Margaret carried my suitcase upstairs despite my protests. "You can argue after breakfast?" she said. The guest room was small and sunny, with a quilt folded at the foot of the bed and a stack of mystery novels on the nightstand. There was no chandelier, no designer vase, no marble countertop. But when I set Samuel's photograph on the dresser, the room accepted it without judgment. That alone nearly made me cry again. After breakfast, Margaret placed a mug of coffee in front of me and sat across the kitchen table. "Now," she said, "tell me the parts the internet didn't catch." So I did. I told her everything, not just the gala, but the months before it. The 2 drawers, the dinner party, the soup in my room. Ethan's silence. Olivia's smirks. The way I had trained myself to take up less space in a house where I was supposed to be safe. Margaret listened without interrupting, though her face grew darker with each sentence. When I finished, she said only, "I would like 5 minutes alone with that daughter-in-law." "No, you wouldn't." "Yes, I would. I'm old enough to make it count and young enough to run." That made me laugh so hard I had to press a napkin to my eyes. By afternoon, the video had spread further. Benjamin's statement helped, but not enough to erase it. People had opinions. They always do. Some called Olivia cruel. Some called Ethan weak. Some praised me in ways that made me uncomfortable, as if one viral moment could flatten a whole life into a saintly headline. Margaret took my phone. "You may have this back after supper. I am not a child. No, you're a retired English teacher with a wounded heart and unlimited access to comments from strangers. That is more dangerous." I let her keep it. That evening, Ethan called Margaret's landline because I had not answered my cell. Margaret looked at me before handing over the receiver. "Your choice." I took it. "Hello, Mom." His voice sounded rough. "Are you okay?" There it was again. "I'm safe." "That's not what I asked." I closed my eyes. "I know." He was quiet for a moment. "I went into your room after you left. Something in me tightened." "I wasn't snooping," he said quickly. I stood there. I saw how little you had. 2 drawers. A closet that looked like a guest's. I thought I had brought you home, but I had stored you." The sentence broke my heart. At least now he was seeing clearly. "I'm sorry," he whispered. I know you are. I want to come by tomorrow. Not tomorrow. He inhaled sharply. I need space, Ethan. Not forever. Just enough to hear my own thoughts without your guilt standing in the room asking me to comfort it. He was silent. Then he said, That's fair. It was the first time he had not pushed. I noticed. And Olivia? I asked. She's not good. I looked out Margaret's kitchen window where the last light of day rested on the fence. What does that mean? She hasn't eaten much. She wrote a statement for work, but she didn't post it. She said she didn't want to turn an apology into a public relations exercise. That surprised me. Good, I said. She asked if she could write you a letter. I thought of all the letters in my wooden chest. Letters from students who had needed time to find words. She may write it. I may not answer quickly. I told her that. Another small change. Thank you. His voice broke. I miss you, Mom. I miss the son I know you can still be. He let out a quiet sob. I did not take it back. Because hope should not always be soft. Sometimes hope must tell the truth and leave the door unlocked. After we hung up, Margaret said, That was generous. It felt cruel. Truth often does when you've spent years serving it with sugar. The next 2 days passed slowly. I toured the senior apartment building near Grant Avenue. It was modest, 3 stories, with a brick entrance, a small library, and a community room where someone had left a puzzle half-finished on a card table. The available unit had 1 bedroom, a tiny balcony, and a kitchen just big enough for one person to turn around without bumping into regret. I stood in the empty living room and imagined Samuel's photograph on the bookshelf. The wooden chest beneath the window. A small table by the balcony door where I could write letters again. It's not much, the manager said apologetically. It's enough, I replied, and I meant it. That night, Olivia's letter arrived by hand. Ethan did not bring it. A courier did, which told me either Olivia had resisted the temptation to use delivery as performance, or Ethan had wisely stopped her. The envelope was plain, no monogram, no expensive paper, just my name written carefully across the front. Richard Caldwell. I waited until morning to read it. Margaret placed coffee beside me and then left the kitchen without asking to hear it. That was friendship, too. Olivia's handwriting was neat but uneven. Dear Richard, I have started this letter 7 times because every version sounded like I was trying to explain myself instead of face what I did. You came into my home, and I treated you like an inconvenience. Worse, I treated you like someone whose value had to be hidden so mine could look brighter. I mocked your clothes, your words, your history, and your age. I called it teasing because that made my cruelty easier for me to swallow. You did not deserve any of it. I am not writing to ask you to move back. I understand now that asking you to return before I change would only be another selfish act. I am writing because I want to begin telling the truth without asking you to manage my shame. I was ashamed of where I came from. I was ashamed of needing approval. I was ashamed of not feeling important unless important people noticed me. So when I saw you humble and quiet, I mistook dignity for weakness. At the gala, when you could have destroyed me with 1 sentence, you chose not to. That mercy has been harder to live with than public humiliation. I do not know if I can become someone worthy of your forgiveness, but I want to try. I have contacted the hospital foundation to ask whether I can volunteer in any capacity that does not place me in front of cameras or donors. I asked for work no one sees. Filing calls, set up cleanup. I think I need to learn how to serve without being praised. I am sorry, Richard, not because I was exposed, because you were hurt. Olivia. I read the letter twice, Then I folded it and placed it beside my coffee. Margaret returned after a while and looked at my face. Well, she may have written the first honest thing of her life. That's something. Yes, I said. It is, but honesty was a seed, not a harvest. I knew too well from teaching that a person could write a beautiful apology and still return to old habits the next time pride felt threatened. Change required repetition. Humility had to become muscle. Still, something in me softened, not enough to erase the hurt, but enough to make room for possibility. A week later, I met Olivia. Not at Ethan's house. Not at the hospital. At a small coffee shop near Margaret's neighborhood where nobody wore gowns, nobody carried champagne, and nobody cared who had sponsored a table. Olivia arrived early. She wore simple black pants and a sweater. No jewelry except her wedding ring. Her hair was pulled back. She stood when I walked in, then seemed unsure whether to hug me. I saved her the discomfort by offering my hand. She took it with both of hers. "Thank you for coming," she said. "I came because your letter sounded like a beginning." Her eyes filled. "I meant every word. I believe that you meant it when you wrote it." She understood the difference. We sat by the window. For several minutes, neither of us touched our coffee. Finally, Olivia said, "I start volunteering at the foundation next week. Linda Brooks said I can help organize old scholarship files." The irony was not lost on either of us. I almost smiled. "That sounds appropriate." She said some of the files are handwritten. "Good. Handwritten things have done more good than some press releases." Olivia looked at me startled. Then we both laughed. It was small, but real. Her laughter broke into tears quickly. "I am so sorry," she whispered. "I know. Can you ever forgive me?" I looked through the window at people passing on the sidewalk. A young mother pushing a stroller. An old man carrying groceries. Lives moving forward, each one with invisible burdens. "I don't know yet," I said honestly. "But I can tell you what forgiveness will not mean." She nodded, listening. "It will not mean." She nodded, listening. "It will not mean pretending you didn't hurt me. It will not mean moving back into a house where respect depends on your mood. It will not mean giving you access to me simply because you feel guilty. I understand. Pretending you didn't hurt me. It will not mean moving back into a house where respect depends on your mood. It will not mean giving you access to me simply because you feel guilty. I understand. Forgiveness, if it comes, will mean I stop wishing the hurt had the final word." Olivia wiped her cheeks. "I want to change," she said. "Then do it when no one is watching." She nodded. As I looked at her across that small coffee shop table, I did not see a villain anymore. I saw a woman who had built a life from fear and called it elegance. A woman standing at the edge of herself, terrified of what came next. I could not walk the road for her. But perhaps one day I could acknowledge if she truly began walking. When we parted, she did not ask for a hug. She did not ask me to reassure her. She simply said, "Thank you for telling me the truth." And that more than her tears made me believe there might still be hope. The ceremony took place 6 weeks later on a bright Thursday afternoon in the atrium of St. Andrew Medical Center. By then, my life had changed in ways both large and small. I had moved into the one-bedroom apartment near Grant Avenue. Ethan helped carry boxes, but this time, he asked where each one should go instead of deciding for me. He assembled my bookshelf while I sat in a folding chair giving unnecessary instructions, mostly because it felt nice to be heard. When he hung Samuel's photograph on the wall, he stepped back and said, "Dad would like it here." I cried after he left, not because I was sad, because the room finally held my life without asking me to shrink it. My apartment was modest, but it was mine. The wooden chest sat beneath the window. My books lined the wall. A small table by the balcony held stationery stamps and a good pen. In the mornings, sunlight crossed the floor in a golden square, and I drank coffee in silence without anyone correcting the mug I chose. Ethan visited every Sunday. At first, he arrived carrying guilt like a grocery bag he could not put down. He wanted to fix the sink, replace the curtains, buy a better chair, pay for everything. I let him help with some things and refused others. Slowly, he learned. "Do you want help?" became his new sentence. Sometimes I said yes. Sometimes I said no. Each answer taught him something. Olivia volunteered at the foundation twice a week. Linda Brooks had assigned her the least glamorous tasks imaginable, sorting archived files, checking old addresses, labeling boxes, folding programs, making calls that ended in voicemail. To her credit, Olivia did them. No photos, no posts, no polished statements. She showed up early and stayed late. Linda told me this, not Olivia. That mattered too. The viral video faded, as all public storms eventually do. New scandals arrived. New outrages replaced old ones. But the consequences stayed where they belonged inside the people who had lived them. Ethan could not unsee his silence. Olivia could not unhear her own voice mocking me, and I could not return to being the woman who accepted invisibility as the price of peace. Then came the invitation. Not cream-colored and intimidating like the gala invitation had been. This one arrived in a simple white envelope from St. Andrew Medical Foundation. Dear Mrs. Caldwell, with your permission and deep gratitude, St. Andrew Medical Center invites you to the dedication of the Richard Caldwell Mentorship Fund. I read the letter 3 times. Then I called Benjamin. You promised this would not be too much, I said as soon as he answered. He laughed. I promised no such thing. I said it would be meaningful. Meaningful can still be too much. Mrs. Caldwell, you told me once that fear is not always a warning. Sometimes it is simply the sound of a door opening. I closed my eyes. I said too many wise things around you. You wrote most of them in red ink. I smiled despite myself. The ceremony was smaller than the gala, but more intimate. No gowns, no champagne, no glittering performance, just rows of chairs arranged in the atrium beneath tall windows, hospital staff in white coats, scholarship recipients, former students, foundation members, and a few families who had driven hours to be there. Margaret sat in the front row wearing a purple dress and an expression that dared anyone to make me uncomfortable. Ethan sat beside her, neatly dressed, nervous as a schoolboy. Olivia sat on Ethan's other side. She looked different now. Not less elegant exactly, but less armored. Her dress was simple. Her hands were folded in her lap. When I entered, she stood like everyone else, but she did not rush toward me or try to create a scene. She waited. I appreciated that. Benjamin met me near the entrance. He wore a dark suit, not a tuxedo, and a blue tie that made him look younger. When he saw me, his face softened the way it had that night in the lobby. There she is, he said. My first mentor. You are going to make me cry before the program begins. That was always likely. He offered his arm. This time, I took it without trying to disappear. As we walked toward the front, I saw faces I had not seen in years. Former students, some older now with gray in their hair and lines around their mouths. Some had brought spouses, children, even grandchildren. A few held letters I had written decades earlier, protected in plastic sleeves like important documents. I saw a nurse from Tennessee. The public health administrator Linda had mentioned a middle school principal, a retired Marine, a woman who had become a librarian. Each one stood as I passed. Not because I had demanded recognition, because memory had gathered in one room. I sat in the front row between Benjamin and Margaret. Ethan leaned forward and touched my shoulder. Mom, he whispered, you look beautiful. There was no fear in his voice this time. No embarrassment, no performance, just my son seeing me. Thank you, honey, I whispered back. Linda Brooks opened the ceremony. She spoke about mentorship not as charity, but as partnership. She spoke about students who do not lack intelligence, only access. She spoke about the history of the fund, the anonymous contributions, the former recipients who had given back. Then she turned toward me. Mrs. Richard Caldwell asked for no recognition, Linda said, but a legacy hidden too long can become a lesson lost. Today, with her permission, we give this fund a name, not to place one person above others, but to remind every student who enters this program that someone believed before the world applauded. Applause filled the atrium. I held my handkerchief tightly. Then Margaret was invited to speak. That was the part I had feared most. Because Benjamin knew the student I had helped, Margaret knew the woman I had been when nobody important was watching. She walked to the podium with her purple glasses hanging from their chain and placed both hands on the microphone. I taught with Richard Caldwell for more than 2 decades, she began, and I am here to confirm that she was every bit as stubborn as she was kind. The room laughed. I shook my head. Margaret smiled at me. Richard had a classroom that never emptied. Before school, there were students finishing homework. During lunch, students eating sandwiches she pretended were extras. After school, students filling out forms, practicing speeches, crying over breakups, asking for advice, or simply sitting somewhere safe. Her voice softened. She never called it mentoring. She called it staying a little late. I looked down, tears already gathering. She bought notebooks by the case, Margaret continued. She kept spare gloves in winter. She knew which children needed reading help and which needed someone to ask why they were angry. She remembered birthdays. She attended graduations where parents did not show up. She mailed postcards to students during their first semester of college because she knew loneliness could send a child home faster than failure. I heard Ethan make a quiet sound behind me. Margaret looked toward him, then back at the room. And let me say this clearly. Richard Caldwell did not become valuable when a famous doctor recognized her. She was valuable every morning she unlocked room 214 before sunrise. She was valuable every time she chose a child's future over her own comfort. She was valuable even when her own family forgot to ask who she had been. The room fell still. Ethan bowed his head. Olivia wiped her eyes. Margaret's voice grew firmer. So this fund bears her name because names matter, especially the names of women who spent their lives making sure other people's names appeared on diplomas, licenses, acceptance letters, and office doors. So this fund bears her name because names matter, especially the names of women who spent their lives making sure other people's names appeared on diplomas, licenses, acceptance letters, and office doors. Applause rose again, louder this time. I wanted to hug her and scold her in equal measure. Then Benjamin spoke. He did not repeat the gala story in full. Instead, he spoke about the future. This fund will support students entering medicine, nursing, public health, counseling, education, and community care, he said. But it will do more than write checks. Each student will be paired with a mentor. Because Mrs. Caldwell taught us that money can open a door, but a mentor helps you believe you are allowed to walk through it. Behind him, the screen displayed the fund's new name, the Richard Caldwell Mentorship Fund. My name looked strange up there, large, public, permanent. I thought of my father writing Richard on my birth certificate because he expected a son. I wondered what he would say if he could see that name now shining above rows of students, teachers, doctors, and families. Maybe names become what love does with them. Then Linda invited Ethan to speak. I turned sharply. He had not told me. He walked to the podium, slowly holding a folded sheet of paper. His hands shook. Most people here know my mother as a teacher, he began. I knew her first as the woman who packed my lunches, checked my homework, and somehow made every impossible thing in our lives work. His voice trembled. I also stand here as someone who failed her. The room was silent. I let comfort make me passive. I let my mother become small in my own home because facing disrespect would have made my life inconvenient. I thought silence was peace. It was not. It was permission. Tears slipped down my face. Ethan looked directly at me. Mom, I am sorry. Not just for what happened at the gala, for every day before it, when I should have stood beside you and didn't. I cannot rewrite those days, but I can live differently from this one forward. He folded the paper. You taught generations of students to reach back. Today, I am asking for the chance to reach back toward you, not to rescue you, but to honor you. He stepped away from the podium, crying openly. I stood before. I thought about it. He came to me, and I held my son in front of everyone. Not as a performance, not as instant repair, but as a mother acknowledging the first true brick laid in a bridge that would take time to rebuild. Then Olivia stood. My body tensed. She walked to the podium without looking at the cameras or the audience. For once, she did not seem to be measuring the room. She looked only at me. I was not scheduled to speak, she said, and I will be brief because this day is not about me. That sentence alone told me something had changed. I once mistook humility for weakness and age for irrelevance. I hurt Richard Caldwell with words that revealed more about my emptiness than her worth. She owed me nothing, not mercy, not patience, not a second chance. Her voice shook, but she kept going. I am learning that respect is not something you perform in public. It is what you practice when nobody important is watching. Richard, I am sorry. I will spend the rest of my life trying to become someone who understands the kind of dignity you carried all along. She stepped back. No dramatic tears, no request for forgiveness, no reaching for applause. But the applause came anyway, gentle and measured. I looked at her for a long moment. Then I nodded. It was not full forgiveness, not yet, but it was acknowledgement. Linda and Benjamin unveiled the plaque together. The bronze surface caught the light, and my name shone beneath the engraved words, "For every student whose future begins with someone who believes." I touched the plaque with trembling fingers. In that atrium, surrounded by the lives that had grown from seeds I barely remembered planting, I finally understood that recognition had not made me worthy. It had simply revealed what had been true all along. After the dedication ceremony, life did not become perfect. That is not how healing works. Healing is not a curtain falling after a beautiful speech. It is not applause, flowers, photographs, or a bronze plaque on a hospital wall. Healing is quieter than that. It is what happens the next morning when no one is clapping, and you still choose to live differently. For me, healing began in my small apartment with a kettle whistling on the stove and sunlight touching Samuel's photograph. I built new routines. Every Monday and Wednesday, I walked to the Grant Avenue Community Center with a canvas bag full of pencils, notebooks, peppermints, and reading worksheets. The first week, only 3 students came. A shy girl named Maya, who wanted to become a nurse but hated biology vocabulary. A boy named Jordan, who said he was bad at writing before I had even seen a sentence. And a senior named Luis, who needed help with scholarship essays but kept saying college was probably too expensive anyway. I recognized all 3 immediately. Not their faces, their fear. Fear has many accents, many hairstyles, many family stories, but it always sits the same way in a chair, half ready to run before hope can embarrass it. So I did what I had always done. I asked questions. I gave homework. I corrected commas. I brought snacks and pretended I had packed too many. I told Jordan that bad at writing was not a permanent diagnosis. I told Maya that medical words were just puzzles wearing lab coats. I told Luis that expensive doors were not always locked. The next week, 7 students came. By the end of the month, we needed another table. Benjamin came whenever his schedule allowed. The first time he walked into the community center still wearing his hospital badge. The students stared at him as if a celebrity had entered. He smiled, took off his jacket, rolled up his sleeves, and sat beside Maya with a biology worksheet. "I used to hate these terms too," he told her. She blinked. "You're a heart surgeon." "Yes," he said, "but I was a confused 15-year-old before that." From across the room, I watched him teach her how to break down the word cardiomyopathy, and I felt something old and holy move through me. A seed becoming shade. Ethan visited often, but no longer in a panic to prove himself. Some Sundays he brought groceries, and some Sundays he brought only himself. We drank coffee on my balcony, which overlooked a parking lot, 2 maple trees, and a bus stop, where people stood each morning carrying lunch bags, backpacks, and private worries. One afternoon he said, "I started therapy." I looked at him over my mug. "That's brave?" He gave a small laugh. "It feels embarrassing." Brave things often do at first. He nodded, staring down at his hands. "I'm trying to understand why I freeze when there's conflict. Why I let silence feel safer than truth." I thought of him as a boy hiding in his room whenever Samuel and I argued about bills. I thought of all the times I praised him for being easy, for not making trouble, for staying quiet when life was hard. Parents can plant weeds without meaning to. "I may have taught you some of that," I said softly. He looked up quickly. "Mom?" "No." "Yes," I said. "Your father and I were under strain for years. Money, illness, work. Maybe you learned that love meant not adding one more problem." His eyes filled. "I don't want to pass that on," he said. "Then don't. Learn a new way." He reached for my hand. "I'm trying. I know." That was how we rebuilt, one honest sentence at a time. Not by pretending the hurt had vanished, but by refusing to let it be wasted. Olivia's change was slower. That made it more believable. She did not arrive with grand gestures. She did not fill my apartment with flowers or post emotional tributes online. She volunteered at the foundation, sorted files, answered phones, and wrote thank you notes by hand. Linda told me Olivia once stayed 2 hours late organizing old scholarship letters by year, because Mrs. Caldwell would want them preserved properly. I did not know whether to laugh or cry. Eventually, Olivia began coming to the community center too. The first time she came, she stood near the doorway holding a box of donated folders. "I can leave these and go," she said. "You can stay and label them," I replied. She looked surprised, then grateful. She sat at the back table for 2 hours, labeling folders, while students moved around her asking questions, sharpening pencils, arguing about essay introductions. No one knew about the video. No one cared about her old image. She was simply a woman writing names neatly on manila tabs. At the end of the evening, Jordan asked her, "Are you a teacher too?" Olivia looked startled. "No," she said. Then she glanced at me. "I'm learning." I pretended not to hear, but I did. Months passed. The Richard Caldwell Mentorship Fund grew. Not because of the viral video alone, though, that had opened the first floodgate, but because former students began reaching back. Small donations arrived with letters. $10 from a retired cafeteria worker, $50 from a nurse, $500 from an engineer who wrote, "Mrs. Caldwell once gave me bus fare and told me not to quit." A law firm donated in honor of a partner who had been one of my quietest students. The fund became less about me and more about a chain of hands. That was exactly as it should be. One chilly November evening, the community center hosted a student showcase. Nothing fancy. Folding chairs, paper programs, cookies from the grocery store, coffee in big silver urns. Parents, grandparents, siblings, and volunteers filled the room. Maya read an essay about wanting to become a nurse because her grandmother had died feeling unseen in a hospital. Luis announced he had submitted 4 college applications. Jordan stood at the microphone with shaking hands and read a paragraph he had revised 7 times. I used to think writing was for people who already had something important to say, he read. Now I think writing helps you find out why your life matters. I had to press a napkin to my eyes. Afterward, Ethan helped stack chairs. Olivia wiped tables beside him. Benjamin spoke with a group of students near the bulletin board. Margaret sat with a cookie in each hand, claiming one was for later. I stood near the doorway watching all of them. My family was not what it had been. It was not what I once imagined either. It was something more honest. Ethan came over and placed an arm around my shoulders. Proud, he asked. Very. Of them, I looked at the students, then at Benjamin, then at Olivia, carefully folding a tablecloth instead of pretending not to know how. Yes, I said. Of them. Of you. Of all of us for not stopping at the worst chapter. Olivia approached slowly. She held a stack of handwritten thank you notes from the students. These are for you, she said. I took them. Her eyes were gentle now, still carrying regret, but no longer hiding behind polish. Richard, she said softly. May I hug you? She asked. That was why I said yes. Her arms came around me carefully, as if she knew trust was not something to grab. I felt her cry quietly against my shoulder. I'm still sorry, she whispered. I know. I'm still working. I see that. When she pulled back, I touched her cheek. I forgive you enough for today, I said. Her face crumpled with relief. It was not a dramatic ending. It was not a door thrown open forever. It was enough for that moment. And sometimes, forgiveness arrives that way, not as one grand declaration, but as a daily portion, measured carefully, offered honestly, protected by wisdom. That night, after everyone left, I stayed behind to turn off the lights. Benjamin waited by the door. You know, he said you're doing it again. Doing what, changing lives and pretending you're just keeping busy. I smiled. At my age, a woman needs hobbies. He laughed and kissed my cheek. My first mentor. My dear boy, I said. When I stepped outside, the air was cold and clear. Ethan had pulled the car around, but I waved him off. Ill walk, I said. It's dark. The community center is 3 blocks from my apartment. Mom, I know the way. He hesitated, then nodded. Text me when you're home, I will. Olivia stood beside him holding his hand. Good night, Richard. Good night, Olivia. I walked home beneath streetlights, my canvas bag over one shoulder, the students' thank you notes tucked safely inside. The city hummed around me. Cars passed. A dog barked. Somewhere someone laughed through an open window. I thought about the night Olivia laughed at me in the hospital lobby. How small I had felt. How certain she had been that my life contained nothing worth honoring. Then I thought of Benjamin's voice, Mrs. Richard Caldwell, my first mentor. But the truth was, I had not become worthy when he said it. I had not become valuable when the room applauded, when the plaque was unveiled, when the fund took my name. I had been worthy in the kitchen peeling potatoes. I had been worthy eating soup alone in my room. I had been worthy in my old navy dress, in my borrowed shawl, in my silence, in my sorrow. Recognition did not create my value. It simply reminded me to stop handing it over to people who could not see it. When I reached my apartment, I turned on the small lamp by Samuel's photograph and opened the first thank you note. Dear Mrs. Caldwell, thank you for making me feel like my future is not locked. I sat down slowly, hand over my heart. Outside my window, the world kept moving. Inside, my little apartment glowed with quiet peace. And for the first time in a long time, I did not feel hidden. I felt planted, still growing, still giving shade, still here.